Hey guys, tonight we're stepping into polished shoes and stepping way back in time, straight onto the polished decks of the RMS Titanic, but not just anywhere. No, you are a first-class passenger, darling, not one of the riffraff elbowing for a bed near the boiler. You've got an ocean view suite, silk-lined luggage, and a ticket that costs more than most people's yearly salary. But before we get too cosy, quick reality check. This ship is going down. You probably won't survive this. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you're at it, let me know where you're watching from and what time it is. I always picture you all out there, tuning in with sleepy eyes and earbuds in. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. It's April 10th, 1912, and the streets of Southampton are thick with excitement, fog, and the scent of coal smoke. You arrive in a sleek black car, possibly a Daimler if you're British nobility or one of those flashy American millionaires trying to make a splash. A crowd has gathered just to watch the rich board. Yes, literally watching you board a ship is entertainment. A uniformed porter helps you out, nodding respectfully, though he won't make eye contact unless you speak first. You're not carrying your own bags, of course. That's what porters and your valet are for. If you're female, your lady's maid is trailing behind like a silent ghost, already mentally unpacking the trunks. And yes, trunks, plural. You've brought 8, not counting the hat boxes. The Titanic looms over the harbour like some floating cathedral, white sides gleaming, 4 colossal smokestacks, one of which is fake, but you don't know that, and a red carpet leading up to the first-class gangway. That's right, there are separate entrances for each class. The working poor get herded through the lower levels like cattle, but you walk a wooden ramp straight into grandeur, with crewmen standing at attention to tip their caps. You barely notice them. Inside, you're greeted by a dazzling sight. Polished mahogany walls, gleaming brass fixtures, a grand staircase that practically dares you not to faint with admiration. This isn't just a ship. It's a floating Versailles, and you're royalty for the next 6 days. Or so you think. You catch a glimpse of yourself in one of the gilded mirrors as you pass. Excellent posture, good hat angle. You're doing great. A steward appears at your elbow, impossibly quiet in his white gloves, and asks if he may escort you to your stateroom. You nod, of course. You don't remember his name and you won't learn it, but he'll remember yours. He's been trained to know not just your name, but your drink order, the correct way to fold your newspaper, and what time you prefer your tea. Your mere presence here means you're one of the elite, someone with old money, new money, or a title too long to pronounce. As you walk down the first-class corridor, your shoes barely whisper on the carpeted floors. The hallway is wide, lit by electric lights that give off a steady, comfortable glow. No flicker, no gas lamps, no soot. Modern and pristine, with a faint scent of beeswax and rosewater. There's a quiet hum of other passengers arriving, voices low and educated, occasionally accented with French, German or Bostonian drawl. When you reach your suite, the steward opens the door with a subtle flourish. This isn't a cabin, it's a stateroom suite. A private promenade outside, a bedroom, a sitting room, and, get this, a private bathroom, with a tub. The walls are panelled in rich wood, the chairs upholstered in floral tapestry, and there's a writing desk with Titanic's monogram embossed on the stationery. A bowl of fresh fruit awaits you. Not a banana in sight. They bruise too easily. And there's a button for calling your steward, another for requesting a meal, and a third that rings, somewhere mysterious. You'll press it later just to see what happens. Your valet or maid immediately begins unpacking, hanging garments in the full-sized wardrobe, arranging shoes, placing your toiletry set on the marble counter. You brought your own crystal perfume bottle and silver-topped brushes naturally. No one travels light when crossing the Atlantic in first class. As you settle in, you hear the faint vibration of engines. She's starting to move. You walk out to your private promenade and lean slightly over the railing, watching the docks drift away. People wave. Some cry. A few men light cigars and shake hands in slow, dignified circles. The band is already playing. Somewhere below, the second and third class passengers are packed in tighter, but you'll never see them. Not unless you go looking. And why would you? The ship eases into open water like a city block sliding onto a cloud. You stand there, the wind picking up a little, cool against your cheek, the salt in the air delicate and invigorating. It's hard not to feel smug. You're on the Titanic, the largest moving object on Earth, and you're in its most exclusive tier. First class isn't just about money, it's a performance. You're part of a floating theatre of grace, etiquette, and barely concealed power games. The night settles in, and you head back inside. The steward has already unpacked your evening wear. Dinner's in a few hours. You'll dress formally, because of course you will, and descend that glorious grand staircase like you've rehearsed it in your dreams. For now, though, you sit on the velvet-upholstered settee, maybe sip a bit of sherry poured from a cut-glass decanter, and leaf through a magazine. Punch, if you enjoy satire. The Ladies' Realm, if you're feeling aspirational. Or perhaps a slim French novel someone gave you strictly for the voyage. You don't understand half of it, but the cover is charmingly scandalous. Outside your suite, the Titanic glides through calm water, engines humming. You're not quite at sea yet, but you're already far from land. And so begins your first-class journey, a blend of opulence, delusion, and a ticking clock beneath all the velvet. Your suite is so beautiful you almost forget you're on a ship. That is, until the gentle rocking reminds you. Barely noticeable, like being swayed in a cradle by someone who really knows what they're doing. When you wake the next morning, there's no alarm clock, no jarring bell or ship horn, just soft footsteps outside your door, the hushed rustle of trays being carried, and the faintest clink of china. Your steward has already laid out your breakfast in the sitting room. He must have let himself in while you were still asleep. The smell of coffee drifts over, tempting enough to stir you from those luxury sheets. The bed itself. It's not some narrow bunk. You've got a full mattress, feather-stuffed, with embroidered linens and more pillows than you'll ever use. Your head sank into them like whipped cream last night. The room has a stillness to it. Heavy curtains muffling the outside world, a sconce on the wall casting a golden glow. There's no porthole in your bedroom because that would spoil the aesthetic. But your private sitting room opens to a promenade deck, and beyond that, open ocean. You roll out of bed, wrap yourself in a dressing gown stitched with your initials, and step into slippers that were probably warmed by someone. The carpet is thick and soft underfoot. You pass by your writing desk, already restocked with fresh Titanic stationery, and head to the breakfast tray waiting for you. Let's see. Silver teapot, bone china cup, toast in a little rack, of course. Butter in a chilled dome, orange marmalade imported from Seville, and soft-boiled eggs in a silver egg cup. That's just the basics. You could have ordered kidneys, smoked haddock, kippers, or grilled ham. You didn't. It's too early to be brave. You eat slowly, savouring the food and the quiet, because this is the most peaceful moment of the day. Later there will be people, eyes, schedules, expectations, but now it's just you, your breakfast, and the knowledge that your only job today is to exist in luxury. You take a sip of tea, perfectly steeped. Your steward appears just then, practically ghost-like, and inquires if you'd like your bath drawn. You nod, obviously. You head into the adjoining bathroom. It's marble-tiled and lit by frosted glass globes. There's a proper bathtub, not a tin pail or a cramped stall, but a deep full-length tub with running hot and cold water. Titanic's plumbing is state-of-the-art, which feels like witchcraft in 1912. You sit in the tub and soak, eyes closed, the faint swaying of the ship adding to the decadence. No rush, no appointments. You're not the captain, after all. When you finally emerge, skin wrinkled, brain relaxed, you're not getting dressed alone. Your valet or maid is waiting with the day's outfit already selected. The clothes are not just clothes, they are armour. For men, it's a tailored morning suit, pressed shirt with a stiff detachable collar, and a necktie knotted into submission. For women, it's more elaborate. First, layers of undergarments, chemise, corset cover, petticoats, stockings. Then the day dress, high neckline, long sleeves, and yards of delicate fabric stitched by someone with a strong magnifying glass and infinite patience. There are hat pins, gloves, maybe a parasol, shoes with pearl buttons, a brooch your aunt left you in her will because she thought you were the only one in the family with the face for sapphires. Dressing takes time. It's a ritual, and everyone on this ship will judge how well you performed it. Once dressed, you check your reflection in the full-length mirror. Posture, erect. Expression, pleasant but distant. You open your door and step into the corridor where the world is already awake. You catch a whiff of perfume as another first-class lady glides past, followed by her maid carrying a lapdog in a blanket. A man with a moustache that belongs in a war novel nods politely, lifting his bowler hat just enough. Someone else has left their door open. A child inside is screaming about having to wear his cravat. You sympathise. Breakfast is also being served in the dining saloon for those who prefer social eating. You pass the room as you head toward the grand staircase. It's bright with sunlight pouring through tall windows. The tables are covered in white linen and set with more silverware than seems strictly necessary. A steward pours coffee for a group of American socialites mid-laughter. At another table, a lady holds a lorgnette to read the menu like it might personally insult her. You opt instead to explore. The Titanic, after all, is a city on the sea, and you haven't even seen half of it. As you make your way through the first-class corridors, you notice how smooth everything is. No creaks, no rattles. The walls are panelled in satin wood and mahogany, with decorative plaster ceilings overhead. Brass handrails gleam like someone polishes them hourly. Which, to be fair, someone probably does. You descend the grand staircase for the first time that morning. It curves in an elegant loop, crowned by a glass dome that spills sunlight like champagne. In the centre is the famous cherub statue. Yes, the one people will obsess over later. It holds an electric torch aloft like it's guiding the way, but mostly it just stares at you with smug carved eyes. There's a clock below it flanked by two figures representing honour and glory, just in case you forgot how self-important first class can be. A trio of ladies passes you on the stairs, their gowns rustling like tissue paper, hats teetering with ostrich feathers. You recognise one of them. Her husband owns a railroad or a fleet of something. You can't recall. They pretend not to notice you, but their glances linger long enough to register your outfit. A subtle nod of approval. You've passed this morning's unspoken test. As you reach the bottom of the staircase, you spot something curious. A steward escorting a small dog down the hall. Not a working dog. A pampered, beribboned lapdog with its own monogrammed pillow. There are at least 12 dogs on board. Some even have custom coats. One rumour, probably untrue, says a woman smuggled her Great Dane into a private suite. The Titanic might have class boundaries, but for dogs, it's practically a 5-star hotel. And then there's the quiet hum of debate you occasionally catch between crew members. Little murmurs about the ship's engines or a note someone received about icebergs to the north. It's vague, not alarming. Mostly just background chatter. Besides, the sea is calm today, glassy and wide. You look out a nearby porthole and see nothing but sky reflected in blue. As you walk back toward your stateroom, you pass a man reading a telegram aloud to his wife. It's been relayed from the Marconi wireless room. Yes, the Titanic has wireless communication. It's all very modern. She listens with polite interest while sipping her morning sherry. You can't help but wonder what kind of message would be urgent enough to interrupt first-class leisure. Back in your suite, your maid has laid out gloves and a parasol. The promenade awaits. It's time to be seen. There's a moment, just a brief one, as you stand at your stateroom door, gloved hands smoothing the front of your perfectly tailored ensemble, where you feel like an actor about to step on stage. And you're not wrong. The first-class promenade on Titanic isn't just for fresh air. It's a stage, a runway, a cold Atlantic catwalk where appearances are everything, and subtle judgment wafts through the sea breeze like an expensive cologne. You step out onto the long covered deck that stretches along the B deck. The floor smooth under your shoes, the edges neatly lined with white painted railings and deck chairs arranged like orderly soldiers. The air hits you first, clean, crisp, with that briny tang that whispers of deep, endless water. It's surprisingly invigorating, especially paired with the soft creak of wood beneath your feet and the rhythmic hiss of the ocean slicing under the hull. Already others are here, some walking briskly, looping the deck for their constitutionals, others seated reading newspapers or embroidery patterns, pretending to ignore each other while secretly clocking every passerby. It's a delicate social ballet, really. You walk not too fast, not too slow. You don't gawk, you glance, you don't wave, you acknowledge. There are nods, quiet greetings, sometimes a murmured "good morning," always accompanied by a microsecond inventory of your hat, hemline and posture. Men have an easier time of it. A well-cut coat and polished shoes go a long way. But women, every step is a test. Is your hat too forward? Too frothy? Did you pick the wrong gloves for morning promenade wear? And don't even get started on the tension between British and American fashion standards. You're walking a razor's edge, darling, and someone from Boston is definitely whispering about your pleats. As you pass a pair of gentlemen with cigars, yes, even this early, one of them gives you a nod. He might be someone, a banker, a viscount, or one of those new money American industrialists who smell like engine grease and freshly minted coins. Either way, you return the nod, distant, polite. You're not desperate. You reach the forward end of the deck where a few passengers lean out to peer at the waves splitting before the bow. There's no engine noise here, just the wind and the hypnotic hiss of water. It's peaceful. For a moment you can forget the weight of silk on your skin, the tug of corset stays, the layers upon layers meant to shield you from more than just the cold. Nearby, a woman comments softly about how Titanic the sea looks today. Her friend laughs, because yes, everyone's still delighted by the name. Titanic. It sounds invincible, mythical, like something carved into the side of a mountain. Of course it'll never sink. People say it with a half smile, like they're sharing a secret with destiny. A steward strolls by with a tray of letters. Mail, on a ship. You're basically in a floating hotel/city/post office. There's even a Marconi wireless room for telegrams, though it costs a pretty penny. Still, many passengers indulge. What's a few shillings when you're rich and want to tell your sister in Boston that the lobster last night was slightly overdone? You pause at one of the deck chairs, wicker, with a soft plaid blanket folded neatly on top. You don't plan to sit, but it's good to act casual. You lean against the rail instead, staring out at the endless blue. Somewhere out there, a cold silence waits, but you don't feel it yet. The sun is warm enough to make you squint, though the air still nips at your cheeks. It's April, after all, and the Atlantic doesn't care about your wardrobe choices. You overhear a conversation between two older men discussing stocks, something about steel, or maybe railroads. You nod internally. Boring. But good to be seen in the vicinity of finance. Further down, a woman in an overly decorated hat is holding court with a small group of younger passengers, telling a likely embellished story about meeting the King of Belgium at a dinner party. You suspect she's never left Yorkshire. There's a quirky little moment as a child bursts from one of the nearby doors, chased by a frazzled nursemaid. The boy is laughing, waving a tin toy in one hand and dragging half a sandwich in the other. A few heads turn, but most of the first-class passengers smile indulgently. Children are allowed to exist, provided they do so charmingly and at the correct decibel level. Now, about your outfit, because this is the promenade moment, and you'll want to remember it later when someone inevitably paints it, or writes a letter to their cousin describing it. If you're a woman, your walking dress is probably in soft grey or navy, with just a hint of embroidery along the hem. Your hat is wide-brimmed, pinned with something that used to fly. If you're a man, your overcoat is perfectly fitted, gloves discreetly tucked in your pocket, shoes freshly buffed that morning by someone who definitely doesn't get paid enough. And here's the thing no one tells you. People fall in love on the promenade, or at least they pretend to. There are glances held a beat too long, accidental shoulder brushes, and oh, would you care to join me for a lap around the deck? Entire novels begin here. So do several scandals. You'd never guess it from the stiff collars and polite smiles, but just under the surface, first class is a social jungle, and you're somewhere between prey and predator. Speaking of which, you spot a familiar face, someone you danced with at a country estate last season. Do they remember you? Their eyes catch yours for half a second. You get a nod. Nothing more. Cold. The game has begun. A strange little detail surfaces in your mind. Someone mentioned that some passengers brought cars aboard, actual motor cars stored in the cargo hold. You wonder who brought one, and whether they plan to drive it off the dock like Gatsby when they reach New York. You also recall a rumour about a mummy in the cargo hold, supposedly cursed. It's probably nonsense, but then again, so was the idea of this ship ever sinking. A steward rings a bell down the promenade. It's not urgent, just an announcement. Time for the ship's daily routine to roll on. Tea, deck games, luncheon. You glance at your watch, though honestly, you wear it more for show. Someone nearby checks theirs too, a gold pocket model snapped open like a secret. You decide it's time to head in. You've been seen. You've seen others. Balance has been achieved. As you walk back toward your suite, you overhear one final thing. A pair of women murmuring about the Marconi room again. Apparently they intercepted a message from another ship, Something about sea ice further north. One of the women shivers. The other laughs and says, "It's unsinkable, dear." You don't say anything. You just keep walking, because of course it is. Back in your suite, the sun has shifted, casting a warm glow through the lace-covered windows, and your maid is already laying out your next change of clothes. Because yes, it's time to get dressed again. Morning promenade wear simply will not do for luncheon. You're starting to realise that dressing aboard the Titanic is a full-time job, or at least it would be if someone else weren't doing most of the heavy lifting, literally and socially. If you're male, the shift is subtle. The morning coat is swapped for a lounge suit, maybe in charcoal or slate grey, paired with a fresh shirt, a cravat tied just so, and a waistcoat that says, "I could own a bank or I could just be bored." If you're female, the transformation is more elaborate. Corset adjusted, petticoats refluffed, a day dress more suited for sitting in public than strolling, something in lavender or robin's egg blue perhaps, with decorative buttons and just enough ruffle to be taken seriously without looking common. Your maid tucks a few stray hairs under your hat. A different hat, of course. By the time you emerge from your suite, refreshed and reassembled, the hallway is full of the soft shuffle of other first-class passengers doing the exact same thing. Luncheon isn't optional, it's an event. You walk toward the grand staircase again, its cherub lamp now lit more for ambience than necessity, and descend with the practiced ease of someone who's attended 100 garden parties and intends to outlive them all. The first-class dining saloon is more like a palace masquerading as a restaurant. It stretches nearly the full width of the ship and seats over 500 passengers, though there's so much space between the tables you could drive one of those cargo hold cars through without bumping a chair. The walls are white panelling with gilded accents, and the ceiling is high, coffered, and painted the softest cream. It smells faintly of polished wood, lilies, and roasted meats. You're escorted to your table by a steward who knows your name. He pulls out your chair, tucks the linen napkin over your lap with a practice flick, and glides away to retrieve the first course. Around you, conversations bloom like roses. Quiet laughter, clinking glasses, and the occasional cough covered hastily by a gloved hand. The menu is printed daily and changes depending on the chef's whims and what the Titanic's massive storerooms have on hand. Today you begin with consommé Olga, a clear beef broth with tiny slices of sturgeon swimming like dainty fish. Then it's poached salmon with mousseline sauce, followed by filet mignon lily, served with a demure portion of vegetables sculpted into shapes your fork hesitates to ruin. There are 7 courses today, which is considered modest. Each arrives with its own cutlery, its own wine pairing, and its own opportunity to make a small social blunder. You use the wrong fork once, but no one sees. You hope. And then, of course, there's dessert. Waldorf pudding, soft, sweet, slightly sticky, followed by fruit and cheese if you have the nerve. You accept a small pear, mostly for show, and take a moment to glance around the room. There's that countess with the tragic pearl necklace. Over there, an American department store magnate laughing too loudly. And just beyond him, seated at a corner table like he owns the Atlantic, is a man with silver hair and a diamond stickpin so large it could signal a passing steamer. As you sip your coffee, dark, strong, with a bite of bitterness to remind you you're alive, you overhear a conversation at the next table about the ship's refrigeration system. Apparently, the Titanic carries over 100,000 pounds of meat and a full dairy operation below decks. Someone jokes that there's more food on board than in all of Yorkshire. You laugh politely, even though you're not sure it's a joke. Another gentleman, possibly French, launches into a minor tirade about the Americans' obsession with ice. Ice in their tea, ice in their whiskey, even ice in their water. The British have managed centuries without chewing on glaciers, he sniffs. A woman across from him says something about iced oysters being the only proper kind. The table descends into mock debate. You enjoy it more than you'd admit. There's always one guest, though, who tries to be interesting in the wrong way. Today it's a man claiming to be writing a novel about the ship. A novel? As if fiction could possibly improve on this setting. He asks intrusive questions about your impressions of the voyage, which you parry with vague elegance. He'll be forgotten long before dessert. By the time the final spoon clinks against the final saucer, you're pleasantly full, slightly drowsy, and deeply satisfied. You push your chair back, rise slowly, and make your way out of the dining saloon with the same measured pace you entered. It's not done to rush. The hallway outside feels quieter, cooler. Some passengers are already heading toward the lounges, while others wander toward the smoking room or library. You consider following them, but decide instead to take a detour toward one of the more curious features of the Titanic, the electric elevator, or lift, if you're feeling British. Yes, first class has its own elevator. Operated by a very bored-looking young man in white gloves, it glides up and down with a soft hum and a faint jolt when it stops. You step inside, nod politely to your fellow passengers, and ride up one level just for the novelty of it. You're not in a hurry. You just like being above things. Literally. As you step out, you hear a group of children laughing nearby, their governess trying in vain to keep them from touching a decorative urn. It's strangely endearing. There's something about their laughter that makes the ship feel like more than just a rich person's playground. It feels alive. That illusion won't last. You make your way back to your suite, where your steward has already tidied everything again. The bed is remade, the fruit bowl replenished, and a note placed discreetly on your writing desk. It's from another passenger, an invitation to join a card game in the lounge later. You smile. The games are friendly on the surface, but every hand is its own little war of reputation. You glance out your window. The sky is turning a milky pale blue, clouds beginning to gather. The sea is still calm, unnervingly so. The steward returns briefly to ask if you'll be wanting afternoon tea. You say yes, but later. Right now you want a few moments alone, not to write, not to change again, just to sit. You lower yourself into the chair by the window and fold your hands in your lap. Somewhere deep in the ship the engines thrum. Everything around you glows faintly gold in the late afternoon light. You close your eyes. It's easy to believe this will last forever. You don't so much walk the deck this time as glide, floating on full stomach, silk lining, and the kind of afternoon breeze that seems tailored specifically for expensive coats and well-trained hair. The Titanic's afternoon has ripened. The sun now filters through long strands of cirrus clouds, casting that delicate golden sheen you only get in paintings or well-funded dreams. It's time for your second promenade of the day, but this one isn't about fresh air. This one's about strategy, social positioning, establishing alliances, displaying your charm with just the right amount of boredom. You're not alone in this game. The first-class promenade deck has filled out, and now the leisurely strolls have evolved into something much more pointed. You spot a banker from Philadelphia talking politics with a lady in emeralds who's pretending to care. An heiress walking a Pomeranian that's clearly more popular than she is. A young couple chatting too closely for the comfort of their chaperone. This is no longer just fresh air. This is theatre. And there you are. In the centre of it all, a walking silhouette of wealth and polish, your shoes clacking softly against the planked floor. You pause to lean against the rail, ocean wind fluttering your lapel or scarf, whichever is more appropriate. It's the perfect photo op, if photos were allowed outside the darkroom and didn't require 5 minutes of standing perfectly still. You smile to yourself. There's a kind of magic in knowing you look completely composed while the Atlantic churns beneath you, miles deep and filled with mysteries no one really wants to think about. Someone approaches. It's not someone you know well, but well enough. A cousin of a viscount, or maybe just a man with an impressive moustache and an inherited title from somewhere chilly. He offers a pleasant comment about the sea, always a safe topic, and the two of you fall into step along the deck. The conversation is polite, practiced, and just dry enough to keep anyone from getting too interested. You could be talking about anything. The weather, the latest Paris Fashion Week, whether anyone truly likes aspic. The words don't matter. It's the pacing, the matching steps, the casual way he glances at you when he thinks you're not looking. A steward passes, carrying a silver tray with notes and cards. He pauses just long enough to hand your companion a folded paper. A dinner invitation, most likely. These things are traded like social currency on the Titanic, and every table you're invited to is another subtle boost to your onboard stock. You pretend not to read over his shoulder. As you walk, you overhear little snippets of other lives. Someone's bored of Paris already. Someone else is bragging about knowing the chef on the Olympic. A woman mentions her husband couldn't make the crossing, some business in Boston, but that she couldn't bear another spring alone in Surrey. There's a quiet suggestion of scandal there. Everyone hears it. No one comments. A peculiar detail catches your eye as you loop around the deck. A man you hadn't noticed before, dressed plainly, no entourage, stands with a sketch pad, quietly drawing the view. He might be an artist, or a journalist, or worse, second-class slumming it. But his confidence, his stillness, it unsettles you a little. Not because he doesn't belong, but because he doesn't seem to care whether he does or not. You keep walking. Then come the power couples, the Astors, the Carnegies, or the Wideners, some of whom are more legend than fact, but all of whom walk with the casual air of people who own things. Buildings, railroads, pieces of entire countries. You smile as one of them passes, even if they don't look your way. You never know when a single good impression could lead to an invitation, or a mention in someone's will. Now, if you're particularly observant, you'll notice something odd about the way people move at sea. There's a rhythm to it, slightly offbeat. Not a wobble, not quite, but everyone sways in sync, a subtle response to the pulse of the ship beneath their feet. It makes the whole promenade feel choreographed, like a slow waltz among strangers. And waltzing actually comes up in conversation not long after. Someone mentions the band playing a Strauss piece last night. Someone else jokes about the size of the dining room making it ideal for a ball. There's brief talk of organising one, but it's a passing fancy. Like so many others on this ship, ideas bloom and wither by the hour out here. Everyone's floating, not just on water, but on the illusion of time being something elastic. You pause for a moment at a brass plaque set into the railing. It commemorates nothing, just decoration really, but you find your fingers brushing over it as if it holds some secret. It doesn't, but it's solid, real. In a world of soft lighting, careful speech and filtered air, you find yourself appreciating something cold and metallic. As you head back down the promenade, a steward tips his cap and offers you a folded leaflet. It's the ship's daily bulletin, typed and printed fresh that morning, filled with updates on the voyage, the weather and any ice sightings. There's a mention of another ship relaying news of bergs off the Grand Banks. Just a precaution, it says. Nothing to worry about. You fold it neatly and tuck it away, more as a keepsake than out of any concern. The sea is still as glass today. Nothing moves out there, not even the clouds. Eventually the promenade loops back to your favourite spot. A chair, perfectly angled to catch the breeze without mussing your hair. You sit. A steward appears as if summoned by thought alone, offering a warm blanket and a cup of tea with lemon. You accept both. Around you, other passengers settle in for their own versions of this ritual. Some read, some nap. Some watch the sea like it might whisper secrets if you squint hard enough. You're halfway through your tea when a small commotion draws your eye. A deck steward politely but firmly turning away a second-class passenger who tried to wander up just for a look. It's a quiet reminder. This world has walls, even if you can't always see them. You watch as the sun begins to lower, casting everything in golden light again. You breathe in the cold, clean air and exhale slowly. The day isn't over, not by a long shot. There's tea to be taken, a Turkish bath session you're considering, and then the very serious matter of dressing for dinner. Again. But for now you sit still, warm under your plaid blanket, watching the sky melt into the sea. Somewhere far below the engines churn steadily. Somewhere ahead the captain glances at the latest iceberg reports and makes a quiet decision. And somewhere behind your calm exterior you feel it, a tiny flicker of awareness. Nothing dramatic, just the smallest realization that perfection is always temporary, especially on water. You finally rise from your deck chair as the wind picks up, tugging softly at the hem of your coat or skirt. The ocean's voice is a little louder now, whispering beneath the shuffle of shoes and the creak of white-painted railings. The sky has deepened to a softer shade of grey-blue, the sun lowering, shadows stretching long across the deck. Afternoon tea has come and gone for most, and now the ship starts to drift into that golden in-between space. Not evening yet, but the prelude to it. A time for lounging, gossiping and low-stakes performance art, otherwise known as being seen. Your destination is the first-class lounge, a room so opulent it makes Buckingham Palace look like an afterthought. You walk there slowly, still holding on to the dreamlike calm of the promenade. There's something almost cathedral-like about the ship in these quieter moments, as if every door, every step, every flutter of curtain was arranged by someone with divine taste and bottomless pockets. When you step inside the lounge, the air is noticeably different, warmer, perfumed, thick with the scent of waxed wood, ladies' cologne, and the occasional whiff of pipe smoke that's definitely not supposed to be here yet. The room is softly lit by delicate wall sconces and chandeliers, the electric lights disguised cleverly to resemble candle flames. It's all part of the illusion. You're meant to forget you're even on a ship, Forget the cold steel beneath the carpet. Forget the ocean lapping against your floating palace. The lounge itself is divided by elegant columns with carved woodwork and a massive fireplace that flickers, though it's not entirely clear if there's any real heat involved. Maybe it's coal, maybe it's theatre. You don't ask, you just take it in. The hushed voices, the faint rustle of silk, the clink of a porcelain teacup settling back into its saucer. You find a chair, not just any chair, the one with a view of both the room and the hallway entrance, perfect for observing, pretending not to observe, and letting yourself be observed all at once. It's upholstered in green velvet, and you sink into it with the weight of someone who's had a long day of being fascinating. Nearby, a group of women are clustered together, flipping through magazines and commenting on the latest Paris fashions. One of them swears the Empire waist is making a return, which prompts a miniature debate about silhouettes and propriety. You tune in just enough to appear engaged, but not enough to be asked your opinion. There's safety in selective attention. Across the room, a man is shuffling cards at a small round table. He's setting up a game of bridge. Within minutes, others are drawn to it like moths to a candle. The low-stakes thrill of gambling wrapped in layers of polite conversation and unspoken rivalries. You consider joining, but not yet. First, you want to enjoy the sheer absurdity of this space. The carpet beneath your feet is thick enough to swallow footsteps, and the ceiling above is painted to resemble a cosy Edwardian drawing room. Floral patterns, soft pastels, utterly forgettable and entirely comforting. The whole room smells faintly of violets and warm paper. A steward passes by, offering a tray of delicate cakes and something citrusy in a crystal glass. You accept both without hesitation. The cake is light, layered with something tangy, lemon curd maybe, and you can't help but wonder how, in the middle of the North Atlantic, this ship still manages to produce desserts worthy of a Parisian patisserie. A fringe fact floats through your mind. Titanic's first-class kitchen had over 100 chefs, cooks, and assistants, an entire culinary army. They even brought their own chickens aboard, clucking in tiny luxury coops, destined for bouillon and soufflés. You sip your drink and glance toward the fireplace. A man and woman sit there, speaking too quietly to overhear, but their body language says more than their words ever could. They're leaning in. She's laughing behind her glove. His hand brushes her wrist, by accident. It's practically Victorian flirting bingo. Their chaperone is seated stiffly nearby, pretending to read. Everyone's pretending something in here. From the far end of the room, you hear the soft strains of music. Not the full orchestra, but a quartet. Violin, cello, maybe a piano nearby playing accompaniment. It's background, but expertly done, designed to make the room feel even more luxurious, like your conversations are important enough to have a soundtrack. As you settle in, someone sits beside you. It's a woman you've exchanged a few pleasantries with before, a countess, or someone who used to be. She has the kind of accent that floats between London and Paris, and the sort of jewellery that probably has its own insurance policy. She smiles at you, the kind of smile that means nothing but feels like something, and says, "Have you heard about the Spanish Marquis on board?" You haven't, but of course you want to. She leans in just slightly and whispers, "Apparently he's not a marquis at all, just a brewer's son with a sharp moustache and a sharper tailor." The implication hangs in the air like a chandelier, just a little too loose. You both laugh, quietly, cruelly, safely. This is the lounge life. You sit, you sip, you play little games with glances and gossip, all while pretending to be entirely above it. People pass through in waves, some in search of conversation, others looking for people to avoid. Someone recites a line from Tennyson. Someone else misquotes Wilde. You don't correct them. Later you drift toward the card tables. The bridge game is in full swing now. You join the next round. It's not really about winning, though you wouldn't mind winning. It's about the way your hands move across the table, the ease of your laugh, the moment someone mentions your name later in a conversation, and everyone already knows who you are. That's the goal. You glance out the window, one of the few in the lounge, thick and porthole-shaped. The sky's going pale now, losing its colour. The sea, still glassy. The kind of calm sailors call unnatural. But no one in here notices, or if they do, they pretend not to care. After all, calm seas are good luck, right? A man enters the room, quietly tucking away a Marconi message. For a second, you think it might be news of something dramatic. Someone's inheritance, or a last-minute guest. But he just walks to the fireplace and sits, folding his hands. Not a ripple of worry on him, just another guest in a floating palace. Eventually, as the light dims and the chandeliers glow brighter, the lounge begins to empty out. People drift off to dress for dinner, or make their way to the smoking room, where the real gossip will start brewing. You gather your gloves, your shawl, your poise, and rise from your seat. You've done well. You've seen and been seen. You've dropped one clever comment and caught 3 in return. You even passed the silent judgment of the bridge table. And now, as you step out of the lounge and into the corridor, you feel it again. That subtle lullaby of the ship beneath your feet. The ocean is still out there, endless and unseen, and you're still here, a heartbeat above it, glowing with candlelight and layered in silk. It's almost time for dinner, and that means it's almost time to become someone else entirely. Back in your suite, the energy shifts. Afternoon light is almost gone now, and in its place comes that specific golden hush of early evening. When the lamps have just been lit, the mirrors glow soft and warm, and everything feels like it's waiting to become something more interesting. You can hear distant sounds of footmen wheeling service carts, the muffled ring of bells from inside steward stations, the clatter of silverware being laid out one piece at a time. It's happening. Dinner is coming. And if you think the first-class lunch was impressive, you haven't seen anything yet. This isn't just dinner, it's the dinner. Capital D. The social summit of the day, where reputations are sealed, glances exchanged, and fortunes quietly flaunted in the form of lobster sauce and layered waistcoats. What you wear to this meal says everything, and what you say over it might echo all the way back to London or New York, depending on who's seated next to you. So it begins again. The dressing ritual. If you're a woman, you'll need assistance, and not the casual kind. No, your lady's maid helps you into your corset. Not too tight tonight, because you'll be sitting for hours and navigating 10 or more courses. Then the gown, a vision of satin, lace, tulle, or some shimmering fabric that looks like moonlight made tangible. Elbow-length gloves, jewelled hair combs, maybe even a tiara if you've got a title to back it up, or just a healthy disregard for subtlety. If you're a man, your valet is laying out your evening clothes with military precision. This means a full tuxedo or a white tie ensemble, starched shirt, tailcoat, silk bow tie, patent leather shoes that reflect candlelight like polished obsidian. You slip into it all carefully, aware that even a crooked cufflink could damage your standing more than a scandalous love affair. As you stand before the mirror, you inspect the final effect. It's not just vanity, it's strategy. Your entire presence, tonight's persona, is reflected right back at you, elegant, mysterious, unbothered. Or at least, that's what you're going for. A soft knock at your door signals your steward has returned to escort you to dinner. Yes, there are escorts. No, it's not weird. On Titanic, everything flows like choreography, and first-class passengers are the lead dancers. You step into the hallway, joining the stream of polished people all headed in the same direction. The grand staircase, glowing brighter now under its massive dome of stained glass. Descending it tonight feels different. You're not just making an entrance, you're participating in a carefully curated procession. People watch. Not obviously, but they do. A flicker of eyes here, a whispered comment there. You catch glimpses of gowns in champagne and midnight blue, coats embroidered with family crests, gentlemen with pocket watches older than most countries. And then, there it is, the first-class dining saloon. It seems even larger now with every seat taken, every table gleaming under low, flattering light. The place has transformed from elegant luncheon hall to full-on Edwardian fantasy. The noise level is a polite hum, clinking glasses, murmured greetings, a few bursts of laughter quickly subdued. Waiters in white gloves move like chess pieces, each motion precise, each course arriving like a diplomatic envoy. You're guided to your seat at a round table of 8. You don't know everyone, but you've heard of most of them. Across from you, a mining tycoon from Colorado. To your left, the widow of some Belgian textile baron. On your right, a young couple who might be newlyweds or just very skilled at pretending to like each other. You smile, nod, introduce yourself in that carefully breezy way the upper class has perfected. Vaguely amused, vaguely superior, never too interested. The menu tonight is frankly absurd. You begin with oysters, on crushed ice, served with lemon and a mignonette that smells faintly of shallots and secrets. Then comes consommé with quenelles, followed by poached salmon with mousseline sauce and cucumber spirals so delicate they might dissolve if you blink too hard. There's a cold asparagus salad, then lamb with mint jelly, then duck with a sauce you can't pronounce but pretend you can. Potatoes, 3 different kinds, because why not, and vegetables shaped like tiny moons and stars. There's an artichoke heart filled with truffle-scented mousse and a roast squab with cress that tastes more like privilege than poultry. Between courses, you drink. Wines are poured, carefully chosen pairings for each dish. You sip champagne so dry it could cut glass, then a mellow white from the Rhine, then a claret so rich it could probably vote. The conversation flows even more easily now. Someone tells a story about meeting the Tsar. Someone else casually mentions their private island. You nod, smile, contribute just enough to seem intriguing, but never enough to be pinned down. Dessert arrives in waves: peaches and chartreuse jelly, chocolate eclairs, Waldorf pudding, ice cream moulded into the shape of swans. You could die of sugar exposure, but what a way to go. The quirky fact here: you've likely been eating off solid silver plates, with cutlery marked with Titanic's own custom insignia. The salt cellars alone could fund a modest country house. And no, you don't ask how many forks are on the table anymore. You've figured it out. You've survived. As the final coffee is served in delicate bone china, the room starts to shift again. Some rise and head toward the lounge, others to the smoking room. A few linger, unwilling to end the spell just yet. You step out slowly, your feet grateful for the movement, your waist slightly protesting the final 2 courses. Outside the dining room, the corridor feels cooler. You catch a glimpse of yourself in a mirror and almost don't recognize the person there. That air of effortlessness you were cultivating? It worked. You look like someone who belongs here. But beneath the surface, you're full, too full. Not just of food, but of tension. The kind you only get from spending hours smiling at people you don't trust while sipping things you can't pronounce. And yet, there's something undeniably thrilling about it. You're part of a living, breathing illusion, an Edwardian fever dream where every detail is carefully constructed and polished until it shines. And for a moment, just a moment, it's easy to forget that anything bad could ever happen to something this perfect. By the time you leave the dining saloon, the ship feels like it's exhaling. The rush of dinner is over, and now first class disperses like silk smoke through the corridors. Some to the lounges for brandy and conversation, others to the smoking room for politics and poker, and a few, just a few, to their suites to quietly loosen their stays and exhale the evening's performance. But not you. You're not done. The night's only just stretching its legs. You opt for the lounge again, that glittering cocoon where conversation gets a little looser and judgments grow a little more honest, or at least more sharply whispered behind feathered fans. The crowd here has shifted slightly since earlier. Some faces are flushed from wine, others bright from gossip. A lady in mauve is telling a long-winded story about her last voyage on the Mauretania, which you suspect is only half true, though she delivers it with such conviction no one dares interrupt. You float from conversation to conversation like a practiced diplomat. A compliment here, a laugh there, a knowing look exchanged with someone who once sat 2 rows behind you at the opera. You're not entirely sure what anyone does for a living, if they do anything at all, but it doesn't matter. On Titanic, your present company defines your worth more than your past ever could. One of the most charming things about first-class life is the ability to be busy doing nothing at all. You might play a hand of whist, skim a magazine you've already read twice, or leaf through a travel guide to New York with no real intent to visit any of the places listed. It's all very pleasant. Pointless, yes, but elegant in its pointlessness. The steward appears with a tray of liqueurs and fruit cordials, offering drinks to anyone still upright. You accept a small glass of crème de menthe, mostly for the colour. It tastes like toothpaste and regret, but no one drinks it for the flavour. It's just something green to hold while you listen to a man recite a terrible poem about the sea that he swears was published in the Strand. Later, you relocate to the reading and writing room, a quieter, more refined space frequented mostly by women. It smells like ink, starch, and subtle tension. A few matrons are already seated, pens scratching against Titanic stationery as they write letters that will never be posted, but are excellent practice for future memoirs. You take a seat near a window and pretend to write as well. Maybe a brief note to a friend back in London, something vague and sparkling about the voyage so far. You end it with a line like, "It's impossible to imagine anything ever going wrong aboard a ship like this. and wonder if that will feel ironic later. From your vantage point, you can see out into the night. The sea is impossibly dark now, reflecting no light, absorbing every glow the ship casts. It's like staring into a hole carved out of the world. The horizon's vanished. You can't even tell where the ocean ends and the sky begins. It's just one velvet black sheet wrapped around the ship like a cloak. Beautiful, yes, but also just a little unnerving. A quiet debate has broken out behind you. Two women discussing the definition of a new woman. One thinks it means being able to vote and smoke in public. The other thinks it just means wearing bloomers on bicycles. You consider chiming in, but decide to let them wrestle with modernity on their own. Eventually the group thins. The truly fashionable retire early. They believe in beauty sleep like it's a religion, and the rest begin migrating again. The smoking room becomes the next gravity centre. You consider it, even if it is supposed to be for gentlemen. But rules are more like suggestions for first class, and you're curious, so you go. The smoking room is exactly what it sounds like. A haze of tobacco, leather armchairs, polished wood, and the low rumble of male voices pitched to sound important. It smells of cigars, aged whiskey, and ambition. Here, the conversations grow more serious, or at least more dangerous. Politics, money, the market, theories about Germany. You linger near the edges, sipping a small brandy and listening to someone insist the future belongs to automobiles, not horses. It sounds outrageous, but he says it with such conviction you almost believe it. A poker game is underway at one table, the chips clicking with the sound of subtle ruin. One man folds too easily, another wins too often. There's a suggestion of cheating in the air, but no one says it. Not out loud. That would be gauche. Besides, most of them could afford to lose the pot 10 times over. They're gambling for dominance, not dollars. You step outside for a breath of fresh air. The open deck is deserted now. The air sharp and cold, your breath visible in front of you. The stars are startlingly bright, scattered like diamonds across the blackest sky you've ever seen. No moon tonight. Just that vast dome above and the endless silence of the sea below, and the ship gliding forward like a dream. You lean against the railing, gloved fingers curled around the cold metal. Far below, you hear the slap of waves against the hull, the distant rhythm of something powerful and patient. For the first time today, no one's talking. No music plays. There's just you, the sea, and the sound of your own thoughts. It's peaceful, and not in the cosy candlelit way. No, this is the kind of peace that comes with scale. You feel small out here. You, your gown or suit, your title, your family name, all of it feels paper thin when you look out at this much nothing, and still you don't want to go back inside just yet. The cold makes your eyes water, but you don't blink it away. There's something about this moment that feels like a warning, but a quiet one. Not something shouted, just something waiting. Eventually you turn away and slip back through the doors, the warmth of the smoking room hitting you like a memory. Laughter returns. Music somewhere in the background. Someone at the piano. The spell is broken, and you're back in the world of silk and cigars. You make your way toward the staircase, shoes muffled by the carpet, nodding at a few familiar faces along the way. It's late now. The grand hallway is emptying. Some of the lamps have been dimmed, casting everything in a sepia glow that feels like the final scene of a play. You reach your suite and enter quietly. Your steward has turned down the bed. A glass of water waits beside it. A single chocolate rests on the pillow. You smile at the thought of it. Such a tiny, fussy gesture in a world built on excess. But it's perfect. You undress slowly, letting the day fall away layer by layer. You hang your gown or coat, remove your gloves, step out of your shoes, and finally settle into bed. The sheets are cool and crisp. The mattress sways ever so slightly with the ship's movement, like someone rocking you to sleep. You close your eyes. You try not to think about how vast the sea is, or how strange it was to stand alone beneath the stars, or how cold that railing felt beneath your fingers. You just breathe in, breathe out. Let the hum of the engines lull you. Let the silence take you. Let yourself believe, for just one more night, that this ship will carry you safely to the other side of the world. You wake the next morning to the now familiar rhythm of the ship beneath you, that slow, reassuring sway that almost feels like it's breathing along with you. For a second, you don't move. You let your eyes adjust to the soft, filtered morning light peeking through the lace curtains. The scent in the room is faintly floral, with a hint of furniture polish. Your steward has already been in and out, as if by magic. Your dressing gown is draped neatly over a nearby chair, and the breakfast tray has been arranged with surgical precision. Someone knocked at some point, probably. Or maybe not. First-class service is practically clairvoyant. But this morning, something feels different. Not in any dramatic way, just an odd stillness to the air. No footfalls in the hallway, no giggling from the children next door, not even the muffled sound of someone being scolded for wearing a hat indoors. You pull on your robe and step toward the promenade door, unlatching it and pushing it open. The air outside hits you like a splash, cooler than yesterday and sharper. You wrap your robe tighter and look out over the rail. The sea is still astonishingly calm, smooth as a mirror. In the distance, there's nothing but an endless expanse of steel-grey water, flat and indifferent. The sky above is pale, almost white, with clouds feathering low near the horizon. You take a breath. It smells clean, but faintly metallic. You don't know why you notice that. You turn back inside, your slippers padding softly on the carpet. Breakfast is simple this morning. Tea, toast, marmalade, and a soft-boiled egg that gives up its shell with no resistance. You sit at your small dining table, looking out the window as you eat. It's oddly quiet even inside your suite, almost like the ship itself is waiting. Afterward, you let your maid help you into a walking dress, or your valet fasten your collar, whichever version of yourself you've chosen today. Nothing too formal. This is a morning for subdued elegance. You choose grey. You weren't planning to. But today, grey feels right. When you step out into the corridor, there's finally some life. Footsteps, hushed voices, a steward pushing a cart piled high with fresh towels. The grand staircase is its usual self, golden and gleaming. You pass the cherub again. He's still holding that torch aloft like it means something. You give him a nod, just because. You wander toward the Turkish baths, not because you're particularly tense, but because it's a strange and delightful part of the ship that doesn't quite fit with everything else. It smells exotic, heavy with eucalyptus and sandalwood, and there's steam lingering in the hallway even before you reach the entrance. The room itself is surprisingly ornate. Tiled walls in intricate mosaic patterns, marble benches that radiate faint heat, and lamps that glow behind coloured glass, casting everything in soft reds and golds. You're led in by an attendant who clearly takes this all very seriously. If you're male, he might be named Gustav, and he has the energy of a man who's seen things. If you're female, the room is quieter, more private, with gentle attendants who speak in low, encouraging tones. You sweat, you soak, you get scrubbed, thoroughly. The water is hotter than expected, the silence deeper. There's something ancient about this part of the ship, as though you've stepped into a Roman bathhouse with an Edwardian accent. And here's the fun fact. The Turkish baths on Titanic aren't just decorative, they're social. People come here to unwind and to eavesdrop. You overhear at least 2 conversations, one about a shipment of lace, and another, whispered, about someone in second class pretending to be richer than they are. The horror. You dry off, dress again with assistance, and step back out into the ship's cooler hallway. Your skin tingles slightly from the heat and the scrubbing, and for a moment, the outside world feels too sharp, too bright. You head to the lounge again, still seeking quiet, but this time, it's not just idle wandering, it's restlessness. A steward passes by, holding a white envelope on a silver tray. You catch only the name printed on it. Something vaguely Italian, possibly important. He disappears through a side door before you can ask. You find your chair again, though someone else is in it. It's fine. You choose a different one, by the fireplace. The coals are glowing faintly, adding just a touch of warmth to the room. You pick up a book you've no intention of finishing, and let it rest in your lap as you listen to the slow churn of conversation. Someone nearby is talking about the Marconi room. Again. Apparently the operator was up all night sending messages. They say one came in from another liner, the Baltic maybe, about ice further south than expected. But you know how this works. Warnings are like dress codes, only taken seriously by those with nothing better to worry about. Still, a thread pulls at you. Why so many messages lately? Why does the crew seem just slightly tighter-lipped today? Eventually you leave the lounge, You're tired of sitting still, of quiet reading and not so quiet speculation. You head back to the deck where the fresh air hits you again like a slap wrapped in silk. Cold, beautiful, unsettling. The promenade is emptier than usual, but those who are out there seem to walk with a little more urgency. Less casual strolling, more brisk pacing. A few bundled up in furs even though it isn't that cold. Or maybe it is. Maybe you're just used to warmth, and then you see it. Way off, far in the distance, near the edge of the horizon, a faint glint of white. You pause, you squint. It's not a cloud. It's solid, sharp, a single point of brightness against the pale sea. An iceberg, already. But you're in first class. You have faith in nautical precision and over-engineered steel. You turn away. You walk slowly back toward your suite, wondering if maybe you imagined it. On your way, you pass a pair of officers speaking quietly. One of them notices you and smiles, too quickly. That automatic, tight little smile that says, everything is fine, and somehow makes you feel like it isn't. Back inside your suite, the maid has laid out clothes for tea. You sit instead. You don't change. You just stare out the window again, and for the first time on this voyage, the ocean doesn't look beautiful. It looks like a warning. The afternoon deepens, stretching itself thin across the endless calm of the Atlantic. The ship hums steadily beneath your feet, but now the sound feels less like a lullaby and more like a clock. You sit longer than usual in your suite, still dressed in the soft grey you never intended to wear all day. Outside your window, the sea is still flat, eerily so. It doesn't shimmer anymore. It just waits, like it's listening. Your maid reappears at exactly the expected moment, asking if you'd like assistance changing for tea. You nod, more out of habit than hunger. The ritual continues, as always, a different dress or suit, something pastel or light. You make the smallest of requests. No tight laces, fewer layers, and she nods without comment. Maybe she feels it too, the way everything feels slightly off today, like the ship is pretending to be relaxed. In the first-class reception room, tea is already underway, and for the first time since boarding it feels forced. The tablecloths are as white as ever, the silver as polished, the pastries arranged in little pyramids on tiered trays, but the laughter sounds a little louder, the gossip more pointed. It's like everyone is trying too hard to pretend the day hasn't shifted on its axis. You join a table with a few familiar faces, names you haven't fully remembered, only the context they bring. One woman prattles about a new dressmaker in Paris who works with actual diamonds. Another complains about the lack of a proper piano in her suite. You smile, sip your tea and try to be present. But your mind keeps flicking back to the officers you saw earlier and the shape on the horizon, that tiny glint of white. The waiter refills your cup without asking. The tea is hot and floral, but it tastes thin today. No one mentions the ice warnings that have passed through the Marconi room like ghostly telegrams all morning. But you suspect many of them know. They just don't talk about it. It's not polite to discuss navigation during tea. A few gentlemen from nearby tables shift uneasily. One checks his watch every few minutes. Another reads the ship's daily bulletin and tuts quietly at something on the second page. Someone jokes about the cold, saying they're glad they packed their fur coat. Another laughs and mentions needing a fur coat for the butter, since it's chilled solid at breakfast. You watch it all like you're behind glass. The rituals continue, but they feel automated now. Every lifted teacup, every carefully murmured insult, every crustless cucumber sandwich. It's like watching mannequins play society. And yet you stay because leaving might look odd. You finish your tea, thank the waiter, and make your way out as gracefully as possible. As you walk the corridor, you pass by the purser's office. There's a small line forming. Nothing dramatic, just a few passengers inquiring about messages. But one man leans a little too far over the counter, voice hushed, brows furrowed. The purser answers calmly, too calmly. You don't stop, but your steps slow just enough to catch a few clipped words. Precaution, not a concern. And entirely normal for this time of year. Sure. You take the long way back toward your suite, circling down a quieter corridor. On the walls the sconces glow softly, casting long golden light onto the carpeted floor. The ship rocks so gently it feels like standing in a cradle. You begin to wonder, dangerously if you're imagining the whole thing, maybe nothing's changed. Maybe this is just what happens on day 4 at sea. You get bored, restless. You start projecting. But then you see her. A woman you passed on the promenade yesterday. Blonde, American, lovely in a way that suggests old family money and too many boarding schools. Now she's hunched over a chair in the hallway, gloves off, eyes fixed on nothing. Her expression isn't dramatic, it's quietly undone, and that's worse. You pause. You say something polite, something neutral. Are you all right? And she looks up with a smile that barely makes it to her cheeks. Just a bit of a headache, she says. Too much sea air, I think. You nod. You leave her there. In your suite, the air feels heavier than it did this morning. You pull off your gloves and sit near the window. The sea outside is no longer pale. It's turned a deep gunmetal blue, and the sky has begun to fade from overcast to indigo. The horizon is still blank. You try to read. You try to write a letter. You try to not pace. None of it sticks. Then a quiet knock. Your steward. Unshaken, unreadable. The very model of discretion. He asks if you would like dinner in the saloon or in your suite tonight. You blink. That's new. In the saloon, of course, you say. He bows and retreats. You don't want to be alone. You dress once more, and this time it's harder. Not physically. Your valet or maid helps you into your evening wear without trouble. But emotionally, it feels like a performance you've grown tired of staging. Tonight's look is impeccable, of course. You'll appear at dinner flawless, tailored, coiffed, but underneath it all you feel something hollow and unspoken settling in your chest. In the saloon, the lighting is slightly dimmer than the night before, or maybe it just feels that way. There are empty seats now, just a few. Some passengers taking dinner in their rooms, perhaps, or claiming seasickness or nerves. You pretend not to notice and no one says anything, but the absence is palpable, like teeth missing in a smile. The meal is still extravagant. Quail in aspic, roast beef, baked apples with cream, but the conversation is thinner, the toast less enthusiastic. Someone raises a glass to a smooth crossing, and you wonder if they realise how hollow it sounds. You sip your wine. You try to keep pace with the flow of banter at your table, but your eyes keep flicking to the doors. Every time someone enters, you expect an announcement, a bell, a message, something, but no. Just more guests arriving late, brushing snow from their coats. No, not snow, just the cold. The suggestion of snow. After dessert, you excuse yourself early. No brandy, no cards. You need air. The deck is colder than it has been. Much colder. You hadn't expected it, and the wind cuts through your evening wear like needles. But you stay. You walk. You breathe in the chill, sharper than anything from earlier in the voyage. There are fewer people out here now, just shadows moving through mist. You reach the bow and look out. The stars have returned, dazzling, infinite, and the sea below them shines black and silver, too calm. No waves, no spray. Just that hypnotic glide forward. You place your hands on the railing and stare ahead into the dark. Somewhere beyond that blackness the future waits. You tell yourself for the 100th time today that there's nothing wrong. And for the 101st you don't quite believe it. Back in the warmth of your suite, the transition from the frigid deck to the golden hush of the interior feels disorienting. The lamps glow soft amber, the fireplace gives off a gentle flicker, and the steady thrum of the engines pulses below like a quiet heartbeat. You peel off your gloves, noticing for the first time how stiff your fingers feel. There's frost forming on the promenade glass, curling in delicate ferns against the pane. It wasn't there this morning. You tell yourself it's beautiful, not ominous. You pour a small glass of brandy from the decanter in your sitting room and sink into the armchair, robe over evening clothes, slippers replacing stiff leather shoes. You should be tired. You are tired, but your body refuses to let go. You sip slowly, the warmth rising in your chest, and listen to the silence. No voices outside, no music floating in from the saloon, just the faint ticking of the clock on the wall and the whisper of the ship slicing through dark water. You try to distract yourself. You pick up the deck's daily newsletter, still folded neatly on the table, the usual content, weather reports, daily menus, social notices, gossip disguised as updates. Buried halfway down is a note about the Marconi room transmitting late into the night. The latest news from the Californian, it reads. Reports of ice ahead. No cause for concern. There it is again. No cause for concern. The official phrase of the voyage. Your thoughts wander to the men in the smoking room. You wonder if they're still there, trading tobacco-scented theories and bluffs across green felt tables. You think about the lounge, whether the bridge players have given up for the night, whether the scandalous couple near the fireplace finally let their knees touch. And you think about the band. The band plays everywhere, really. Not just in the main saloon, but in the lounge, on the deck, even in the stairwells. They drift like a soft echo through the ship. Elegant wallpaper made of sound. You've passed them before. A modest ensemble of young men in pressed jackets, stringed instruments tucked under their arms like extensions of themselves. Always polite, always precise. Tonight, you heard them in the corridor, playing something slow and lilting. You didn't recognise the tune, but it clung to you. There's something about live music at sea that feels especially unreal. A violin trembles while a ship 3 times the size of Noah's Ark floats quietly through moonless water. You wonder if they choose their own songs, or if someone tells them what to play. You wonder if the music helps them forget the cold. There's a rumour that one of the violinists proposed to a stewardess before the ship left Southampton. Another says he's secretly a count's illegitimate son. That's the fun of Titanic's first class. Everyone has a story, and most of them are better when they're not entirely true. You step back out onto the promenade for one last breath of cold air. The chill has deepened, sharp, crystalline, clean in a way that almost feels sterile. The sky is a riot of stars, the Milky Way draped across the heavens like some cosmic lace curtain. You try to find the North Star, but your eyes keep catching on the constellations. Orion, Cassiopeia, the Big Dipper, poised above the Black Sea like a ladle full of silence. You realise with a small shock that the sea isn't just flat tonight, it's dead. There's no roll, no slap of waves against the hull, just the occasional hiss of water parting like silk beneath the ship's prow. The air too is utterly still. Even the smoke from the stacks rises straight up into the stars. That's the part no one talks about, that silence before, the calm so complete it becomes suspicious. You retreat back into your suite and try to shake off the cold, but it clings to you in a way it didn't before. You place your hand on the radiator. It's warm. Your logic insists that everything is fine. And yet your stomach curls with that feeling you get before the curtain rises on the second act of a tragedy. You change into your nightclothes slowly, your maid already dismissed. The door bolted. The ritual of undressing feels heavier tonight. Too slow, too deliberate. You brush your hair, fold your jewellery into its velvet case, and place your shoes neatly at the foot of the wardrobe. Every movement is exaggerated, as if you're buying time without admitting why. And then you climb into bed. The sheets are warm at first, but cooling fast. You tuck them around your shoulders and try to settle. You even close your eyes, but sleep doesn't come. Not yet. The hum of the engines is louder now. Not because it is louder, but because everything else is so quiet. No clinks of glass, no laughter from the corridor. Just that steady, rolling thrum, like a giant's pulse. You get up again. You go to the window. You place your hand against the glass and feel how cold it is. So cold it almost burns. You peer out into the blackness, searching for lights, for movement. Nothing. The world ends just past the rail, and then movement. Just a flicker. Not ahead. Below. You squint. There, for a second, something glides past the window. White, jagged, ghost-like. You freeze. Was it reflection? Ice? Your heart taps faster. You press your face to the glass, but now there's nothing. Only black sea. You draw back, the image already evaporating like breath on the pane. Then you feel it. A change. Not a jolt, not a crash, just a shift. A whisper through the floorboards, something deep inside the ship flexing, adjusting. The engines seem to pause, just long enough for your body to notice. The silence after is deafening, your breath catches, and then, almost immediately, the hum returns. The vibrations resume, but not quite the same. You stare at the ceiling, then the door. You consider opening it, asking someone. But the hallway remains quiet. No shouts, no alarms, no knocks, and so you do what everyone else does. You go back to bed. You pull the covers higher, lie flat on your back and wait. Maybe you imagined it. Maybe it was nothing. Maybe this ship really is unsinkable. That's what they say. That's what everyone says. The logic is there, the faith, the structure, but your gut doesn't agree. Your eyes stay open, staring into the dark above you while outside your window, the world has just changed. And no one knows it yet. The knock comes softly, but it doesn't matter. You're already awake. You've been lying there for, 20 minutes? An hour? Time feels strange now. elastic, like it's resisting being measured. 1 second stretches endlessly, the next disappears. You sit up in bed, pulse low but heavy, like it's echoing from somewhere deeper inside you. The knock comes again, this time paired with a voice, polite, gentle, your steward. You cross the room and open the door, still in your nightclothes, hair slightly tousled but dignity intact. He stands there, hands clasped, face composed. Too composed. "Sorry to disturb you, sir, ma'am," he says, depending on your form tonight. "But the captain recommends all first-class passengers make their way to the boat deck. Just a precaution." There it is again. Just a precaution. You blink. "What's happened?" "A small incident, sir. The ship's made contact with ice. Captain says there's no danger, but it's best to be prepared. Wrap up warmly, and that's it." He gives a slight nod and moves on to the next door. You stand there for a moment, hand still on the doorknob, the corridor now alive with subtle energy. Doors opening, voices rising, hurried but hushed. You close your door, the sound sharp in the thick quiet. Back in your suite, the night suddenly feels colder. The air has a new quality to it, charged, like the moment before a storm. You move quickly but not yet urgently. You dress with layers, underclothes, then wool. You pull on boots instead of shoes, a fur-lined coat if you brought one, gloves. Not your usual walking gloves, warmer ones you didn't think you'd need. There's a part of you that hesitates at the idea of bringing anything valuable. Jewellery, number, letters, maybe. You choose a few small items. A family photo tucked into an inner pocket, a watch, a slim notebook, your room key, though it already feels irrelevant. Outside in the corridor, the air's alive now. People moving, some dressed, others barely pulled together. A man in a robe and evening slippers, a woman wrapped in a shawl over her nightgown, her hair half pinned. Children appear, clinging sleepily to nurses and nannies, eyes wide, and among them all the first-class manners cling tight. No shouting, no running, not yet. You make your way toward the grand staircase, and it's never looked more surreal. The light is still warm, the chandeliers still glowing like you're heading to dinner, but now people move in clumps instead of graceful pairs. Stewards guide them, calmly, firmly, up the stairs and toward the open doors that lead to the deck. There's someone you recognise, a banker, always loud at breakfast. He's unusually quiet now, his wife clutching his arm. A few others pass you, faces unreadable. Some are trying to chat to keep the illusion alive, but most are quiet, eyes flicking up and around, taking stock. You follow the flow upward. The doors to the boat deck open, and the cold punches you in the face. It's not just chilly anymore, it's Arctic. The kind of cold that slices straight through wool and bone and skin, finds your lungs and sits there. The night outside is the blackest thing you've ever seen. The stars are bright enough to hurt. The sea is invisible, so still it might as well not be there at all. And then you hear it, crackling, soft, subtle, but unmistakable. The sound of ice grinding somewhere, not under your feet, but close. Stewards are directing people toward lifeboats now. Some are already being swung out on their davits, the ropes groaning in protest. Life belts, those stiff, bulky canvas vests, are being handed out. A steward offers you one. You take it. Not because you believe you'll need it, but because refusing would look foolish now. Around you, conversations are building. A man insists this is overkill, that the Titanic is unsinkable. He laughs, a short, brittle sound. His wife isn't laughing. She's already pulling her daughter's lifebelt tighter. A younger couple stands near the rail, arguing in whispers. He wants to wait for information. She wants to go to the boat now. Neither of them moves. Then there are the officers, one calling out orders, another helping to load women and children into a lifeboat with awkward dignity. He keeps his voice measured, but his eyes dart. He's calculating, counting, and that's when you realise there aren't enough boats. You remember hearing about it days ago at dinner, tossed off like a fun fact. 16 boats, 4 collapsibles. Enough for maybe half the people on board. Less, really. But that was fine, because the ship would never need them all. It was unsinkable, right? A boat near you starts to lower. The ropes groan. Women cling to the sides, one holding a wrapped infant like a piece of fragile china. A man steps forward, trying to join them. He's told no, women and children first. His mouth opens, His hands tighten into fists. Then he steps back, jaw clenched. You're still standing on the deck, lifebelt in hand, coat pulled tight, breath misting in the frozen air. You haven't moved. Not really. You're watching, listening, trying to find the line between caution and panic. The ship doesn't feel like it's sinking. There's no angle to the deck, no rush of water, just cold. So much cold. Someone nearby mutters, "We'll be back on board in an hour." Another responds, "If we're lucky." And you feel it. Your first real shot of fear. Not sharp, not loud. Just a deep, low chill that settles beside the cold air in your chest and refuses to leave. You glance toward the other end of the deck. More boats being prepared. Some already away, bobbing like black specks against the sea. You look up. The funnels tower into the sky. One of them still venting steam into the heavens in long, desperate gusts. It sounds like breathing, or screaming. You hear music again, distant, soft. The band is still playing. You don't know where they are, but the sound floats down the corridors and over the deck. It's light, elegant, something cheerful. It makes your stomach twist. Another boat is ready. A steward urges you forward. "If you please, sir," just to be safe. You hesitate. This is the moment. This is where things change. You step forward, breath catching. Or you step back, deciding to wait. Either way, something is ending. You don't move at first. Not because you're frozen, though the cold is starting to seep into your joints, but because you're watching the lifeboat sway just slightly in its ropes, a cradle of canvas and wood dangling over nothing. The officer standing by it looks young, too young. His cap is slightly askew, his mouth set in a firm line that keeps twitching, like he wants to ask someone else what to do. But there's no one above him now. He's the authority. That alone unsettles you more than the sound of ice grinding in the distance. You glance around at the others clustered near the lifeboat. The mood is shifting like the air before a storm. A woman with trembling hands clutches her child and pleads with her husband to come, but the officer shakes his head. Women and children only. The man steps back, lips thin, face blank. He murmurs something about catching the next boat, though everyone can see there may not be a next boat. Not one he'll be allowed on. You feel the pressure of decision rising behind your eyes like a headache. It's not just about safety anymore. It's about social cues, perception, the narrow space between panic and poise. Around you, people are still trying to exist within the boundaries of etiquette, even now. Gloves remain on, hats are straightened. Goodbyes are murmured with the same tone you'd use when leaving a garden party early. A steward approaches you again, this one older, lines of experience etched into his face. "Now, sir, or miss, if you'll allow. Best to go while the boats are still here." His voice is quiet, too quiet, like he doesn't want to be overheard, breaking the illusion. You take a step forward this time, just one. The deck beneath your feet still feels level. That's the dangerous part. It feels stable. If not for the lifeboats hanging off the rails, the music still floating eerily from somewhere and the crowd's shifting weight. You'd never guess you were standing on a ship bleeding out into the ocean. Someone next to you, an older woman in a heavy velvet cloak, suddenly says, "It's quite ridiculous, really." They say she can stay afloat with 4 compartments flooded. No one responds. You all know the number. 6. 6 compartments gone and the Titanic goes under. That was always the line. And you know now, though no one says it, that line has been crossed. You look up toward the bridge. Officers are moving quickly now. Not frantically, not yet, but definitely faster than they were. One man runs past you, boots loud on the planks, and vanishes below deck. A steward mutters something about more passengers coming up from steerage. "Only just letting them through now," he adds with a tight smile. "Wouldn't want to overcrowd the deck." You step closer to the boat. There's a moment of awkward manoeuvring, passengers unsure how to climb in with dignity. A ladder is lowered, and a steward offers his hand, helping women swing one leg over the rail and descend into the boat. Skirts gather awkwardly. A few men try to hide their embarrassment at being turned away. One tries to smile and says, "Save me a seat." His wife doesn't look back. When your turn comes, your body moves before your mind can argue. You step up to the rail. The officer looks at you, pauses. He glances at the lifeboat, then at the crowd still growing behind you. He doesn't say anything, just gives a faint nod, as if to say, now or never. You climb over. The rope creaks as you lower yourself into the small boat, your coat dragging on the rail, your boot catching slightly on the edge before you're in. You settle onto the wooden bench, hands stiff, legs crammed beside others. There's a quiet murmur of voices, nothing loud. The wind whistles faintly and the ropes above groan. And then, slowly, the lifeboat begins to descend. The sensation is strange. You're moving downward while the ship looms behind you, a glowing wall of light and laughter. You can still see figures walking on the deck, hear the band's cheerful tune trying its best to pretend this isn't happening. The ship doesn't look damaged. That's the worst part. From here, Titanic still appears invincible, grand, composed, eternal. But the lifeboat sinks lower and lower, the side of the hull stretching upward beside you like a cliff. As you pass the portholes, you glimpse dining rooms, lounges, corridors still lit like nothing's wrong. Someone inside presses their face to the glass. You wonder if they'll be next. And then the boat hits the water with a soft but final splash. You're afloat, detached. The ropes are unhooked above and now the lifeboat begins to drift. Not fast, just a gentle push, like the sea itself is taking you away from what you thought was safety. A few crewmen grab the oars. They begin to row, quietly, mechanically, their breath visible in the freezing air. No one speaks. You look around. The sea is glass. Not just calm, unnaturally still. So flat it feels staged. The stars above are unblinking, and their reflections on the water look like they're trying to find something. Maybe help that won't come. Around you, more lifeboats are being lowered. Some hit the water and spin awkwardly. Others descend only halfway before jerking to a halt, ropes tangled. You watch as officers scramble to fix it. The quiet is unbearable. You'd rather hear shouting. Someone in your boat begins to sob quietly. She's holding a bundle, child, dog, you're not sure, and rocking back and forth. Another woman offers her a blanket. No one says it'll be all right, not anymore. You turn back. Titanic towers above you, lit from bow to stern, funnels glowing, promenade decks bright with gaslight. It looks like a floating hotel, still beautiful, still proud, and yet you can see it now. The angle, it's slight, but it's there. The bow is dipped, just a few feet maybe, but it's real, and you're not on it anymore. You grip the side of the lifeboat with gloved fingers, knuckles pale as the oars cut through water so clear you can see the stars beneath you. Somewhere behind, a whistle blows. Somewhere ahead, someone asks, "Where's the rescue ship?" And someone else whispers, "It's not here yet." You sit. You wait. And Titanic starts to vanish. The cold isn't just cold anymore. It's a living thing curling up around your limbs, seeping into your coat, your boots, the space between your shoulder blades. It presses against your spine like a warning. You shift in your seat, but the lifeboat creaks in protest and you stop moving. You don't want to be the one who tips it. No one speaks unless they have to. Even the oarsmen row in silence, their breath ghosting into the dark, their hands red and raw against the wooden handles. You can hear the water lap gently against the sides of the boat, a maddeningly delicate sound for something that's about to swallow an empire. You glance across the sea, black, perfect, glassy. A few other lifeboats are scattered nearby, bobbing like toys. Some are too far to make out clearly, others close enough to hear the occasional murmur or cry. One of them looks terrifyingly overloaded, people packed in shoulder to shoulder, two crewmen trying to bail out a puddle of icy water that's already crept in. Another boat seems half empty. Just 10 or 12 people sitting in silence, eyes fixed on the glowing monolith behind them. You wonder why more weren't in that one. You wonder how many were told. No more room, even when there clearly was. Your boat isn't full either. Maybe 20 people, mostly women. A few children wrapped in blankets, tucked in their mother's arms like porcelain dolls. One boy keeps whispering something over and over, "Where's Papa? Where's Papa?" and no one answers him. You hold onto the gunwale with one hand and twist your body slowly, glancing back toward the ship. It's still there, massive and terrible in its elegance. The stern is lifted ever so slightly now, not dramatic yet, not tragic, but noticeable, enough that no one in the boat can pretend anymore. Titanic's lights are still on, bright as ever. You can see the rows of portholes glowing like a city skyline. The grand staircase dome is lit up like a cathedral, and the faint notes of music still drift across the water, now sadder, slower. The band has changed the tune. It's not a waltz anymore. It's something like a hymn. No one's watching them. They're not even on a stage, just a few shadows standing in the cold, playing like it matters, And somehow, it does. Every note cuts through the dark like a whisper of defiance. You can't decide if it's beautiful or cruel. Someone in the boat breaks the silence. An older woman, fur coat tight around her body, clutching a jewelled brooch like it's a rosary. "This shouldn't be happening," she says softly. No one disagrees. No one comforts her. You all just nod in that quiet, helpless way people do when reality has outpaced explanation. Another passenger speaks. This one a steward, crouched at the front of the boat, his voice barely above the wind. "They'll be launching more boats now," he says. "We're just out of the way. We'll wait here until we're called back." But the look in his eyes betrays something else. He's not waiting for instructions. He's watching the angle of the ship. He's counting. You look down at your hands. They're trembling, though you're not sure if it's from fear or cold or both. You've never felt so useless in your life. No task to complete, no role to play. You are, for the first time, entirely passive. An audience member in a tragedy that refuses to start all at once. It's coming in slow, aching degrees. A woman across from you begins humming along with the music. It's faint, off-key, and something about it makes your skin crawl. Maybe it's the fragility of it, the way her voice seems like it's trying to hold something together, even as everything unravels. Then a sound cuts through the dark, a sharp crack, not thunder, not a shout, something more, mechanical. You turn again toward the ship, and that's when you see it. The forward section of the promenade deck is dipping, just a little, but enough. The nose of the ship is no longer pointed horizontally, it's angled down, and the stern is noticeably lifted, just enough that the lights seem to stretch vertically now, no longer in clean rows. People are moving faster on deck, not running, not yet, but faster. The band hasn't stopped. Someone behind you starts whispering the Lord's Prayer, and just like that, the illusion is gone. There's no more denying it. The Titanic is sinking, not metaphorically, not in theory, not as an abstract horror for other people in other stories. It's happening now, and you're in a boat, on the water, and the largest, most luxurious ship ever built is dying in real time in front of your eyes. A young woman in your boat suddenly stands up, shaky, tears streaming down her face, and screams something at the ship. You can't make out the words. She sits back down just as fast, sobbing into her hands. A child starts crying too. One of the oarsmen shifts uncomfortably but keeps rowing. Slowly. Uselessly. Then there's shouting from the deck. Distant, chaotic, bouncing off the water like echoes in a canyon. You see figures running now, clearly running. Some trying to climb railings, others clustered around lifeboats still being lowered, others just standing there, too late or too lost to move. Another crack, louder this time. The bow dips further. You hear something heavy sliding inside the ship. Machinery maybe, a piano, crashing through walls, floors, compartments. Then something terrifying happens. The lights flicker, just for a second. But it's enough. A collective gasp from the boats, like a lung exhaling in horror, and then they steady again. Still glowing, still lying. Someone in your boat whispers, "She's going to break." Another adds, "God help them." And yet, you do nothing. Because what can you do? You're on the water now, and the ship is still miles tall, even in her death. You're still under her shadow, even as she tilts forward into the abyss. You close your eyes and try to breathe. 1, 2, 3. The band plays on. The cold is no longer something you feel on your skin. It's in your blood now, running through you like a second pulse. Your breath escapes in ragged clouds, rising just inches before vanishing into the night, and you wonder how the stars can be so still while everything beneath them comes undone. The lifeboat continues to drift, the water around you silent and smooth, as if the ocean itself is waiting to see how this all ends. Titanic is no longer beautiful, not really. Not in the way it was when you boarded, gleaming and arrogant, a floating palace. Now it's a wounded thing, immense and unnatural in its suffering. The bow is so far down now that the tilt of the ship is impossible to ignore, impossible to rationalise. You don't need maritime engineering to understand what's happening. You only need eyes, you only need ears. The sound is what truly changes things. At first it's just groans, deep, long moans from the ship's internal bones, steel twisting where it was never meant to bend. But then come the bangs, the crashes, the sounds of collapsing furniture, toppling pianos, chandeliers being torn from ceilings. One window on the upper promenade bursts outward, and you hear the pop of shattered glass before it's swallowed by the black water below. And then come the people. From the distance, their shapes, silhouettes, tiny movements against the sharp geometry of the decks. But as they climb the stern, you can see them more clearly. Some are crawling, some running, some just standing in place staring out into nothing. A few lifeboats are still being lowered, but they swing wildly now, tilted, misaligned, dropped with panicked hands. You can't take your eyes off the stern, rising ever so slowly toward the stars. You can see the great letters of the ship's name lit up, Titanic, still glowing in gold like a cruel joke, a ship that can't sink, floating letters on a dying giant. Someone in your boat breaks the silence. She's going. She's really going. The child who had been crying earlier is now completely still, his head buried in his mother's shoulder. She rocks slightly, murmuring things no one else can hear. Another woman pulls a shawl tighter, her hands trembling too much to tie it properly. You reach over and help, fingers numb but steady. She doesn't thank you. She just nods. Then the lights go out. Not a flicker this time, a snap, an instant. The Titanic goes black. For one terrible moment, the only light left in the world is the stars above and the dim glow of lanterns in the lifeboats. Then comes the scream. Not one scream, thousands! It erupts all at once, a roar of human voices rising into the night, tearing through the silence like fire through dry grass. You've never heard anything like it. You hope you never do again. It isn't a cry for help. It's the sound of thousands of people realizing they're about to die. The ship groans louder now, and the angle is unmistakable. The stern is nearly vertical. You can see people clinging to railings to each other, some sliding, some falling. You want to look away. You don't. Then, an eerie quiet. For just a few seconds, the ship seems to hang there, bow submerged, stern high, a great monster paused mid-breath. And then it breaks. The sound is like nothing you've ever heard. Steel screaming, rivets bursting, a seismic crack that rolls across the sea and rattles the oars in your boat. The stern shudders, collapses slightly, then begins to fall, not forward but down into the hole where the bow used to be. You watch it slide. You watch the great funnels tilt and vanish. You watch the last section of the ship sink beneath the surface, lights gone, music silenced, and then the water closes over it. Gone. There is a long, aching moment of absolute silence. No voices, no splashes, no wind. Just the creaking of your own boat as it rocks slightly on the surface of a now starless, shipless sea. And then, from the darkness, the cries. They come suddenly, loud, human, desperate. Dozens, maybe hundreds. You can't tell. Help us! Please! Over here! They're in the water now, the ones who jumped or were thrown clear. Their voices ring out over the still sea, echoing between the boats. People in your lifeboat shift uncomfortably. A few begin to cry again. Someone makes the sign of the cross. And then someone else whispers the thing you were hoping not to hear. We can't go back. You look at them. What? If we go back, they say, we'll tip over. They'll swamp us. You glance around. It's true, your boat isn't full, but it's close. The thought of more people, panicked, grabbing at the sides, clawing to get in. It could flip all of you, drown everyone. You stare at the water again. The voices sound so close. Please, God! You feel something collapse inside you. The woman next to you covers her ears. Another stares straight ahead, jaw clenched, tears silently pouring down her face. No one rows. No one moves. The water is filled with voices and flailing hands you cannot see. You want to scream, to stand up, to command someone, anyone, to go back. But you don't. Your voice stays trapped in your throat with the same frozen fear holding everyone else. Minutes pass. The cries begin to fade. One by one they go silent. Some stop shouting and simply begin to moan. Others go quiet altogether. You strain to hear more, but the sound dies, absorbed into the Black Sea, and that's when you realize most of them are gone. The stillness returns. But it's not the same. It's heavier now. It's filled with the weight of what you didn't do. Someone in your boat starts praying aloud. Someone else starts to vomit over the side. Another just stares at the water, whispering a name you don't recognize. The man who was rowing finally stops, letting the oars dip into the sea. He stares down into the black water, his eyes hollow. And then a voice from another boat far off breaks the silence. Is anyone alive? You don't answer. You just hold your coat tighter and sit in the silence you helped create. You don't speak for a long time. No one does. The silence that follows the sinking isn't peaceful. It's oppressive, heavy. It wraps around your shoulders like the weight of a wet coat, thick with guilt, with grief, with the understanding that something has been lost that can never be retrieved. Not just a ship, not just lives, something bigger, something that made you believe, even for a few days, that humanity could outbuild nature, outdesign fate, outsmart the sea. That illusion is lying somewhere at the bottom of the Atlantic now, in a million steel pieces. The lifeboat drifts. No one rows. There's nowhere to go, nothing to see, no land, no ship, no rising sun. Just that cold, black mirror of water stretching in every direction. You try to imagine where the Titanic was. Try to picture its enormous hull beneath you, mangled and settling slowly into the ocean floor. You try not to think about how many are still down there, how many you left behind. Your fingers are stiff and numb. You've lost track of how long you've been floating. The night seems endless. It could be 2 hours, or 10. The stars overhead burn cold and constant, uncaring, as if they didn't just watch 1,500 people vanish. They blink down at you like curious strangers. The sky, somehow, is still beautiful. That feels cruel. Someone in the boat shifts and gasps. Ice has crusted around the edge of the seat, frost creeping like ivy up the wood. One of the oars is frozen to the side of the boat, stuck fast. You try to move your legs and realise they're stiff, your toes gone somewhere past feeling. You don't know whether they're numb or just not there anymore. Then from the quiet a sound rises. Music. You're sure at first it must be in your head. Just a memory. But no, it's real. A lullaby. A woman humming. It takes a moment to locate the source, and then you see her at the far end of the boat. Rocking slightly, cradling something small and bundled in her arms. She hums with a voice so soft it's almost lost to the wind. You can't tell if it's a child or a bundle of blankets. No one asks. The sound is unbearable in its gentleness. Eventually someone else begins to whisper a hymn. The tune doesn't match, neither does the pitch, but it somehow blends with the lullaby, overlapping, weaving through the still air like a threadbare comforter stretched over the boat. You look down into the water, expecting to see your reflection, but there's nothing. Just blackness. It's like looking into a tunnel with no end. The sea is so flat now that even the oars rest motionless against its surface. You listen to the wood groan softly as the lifeboat bobs. It's the only thing keeping you afloat, and it feels impossibly fragile. A man near you starts mumbling numbers under his breath. You can't make out what he's counting. Names, lifeboats, minutes. He keeps repeating the same digits. 16. 4 collapsibles. 16. You don't interrupt. It's his anchor, and you understand the need for one. Someone asks again when the rescue ship is coming. A quiet voice in the dark. Not angry, not even hopeful. Just tired. Another person answers, soon, and no one believes it. You all nod anyway, like you've made an agreement not to argue with hope. There's a lantern dangling from the bow of the boat. It's dimming now. No one dares adjust it, afraid the wick will go out completely. It's the only light you have. One flickering flame in a world that has turned its back on you. Then, out of the darkness, a voice, distant, shaky. Is anyone there? You all freeze. Another voice responds, this time from a different boat. Here! Then another closer. We're here. You feel a jolt inside your chest. Not quite hope. Not yet, but it's shadow. You lift your head and scan the black. Shapes are forming. Other lifeboats. Some just specks. Some closer than you expected. You hadn't realised how many were out there. Dozens, it seems, scattered across the sea like broken pieces of porcelain. And then, beyond the others, far off, barely more than a glow. A light. At first, you think it might be a trick of the eye. A star falling. But no, it's moving. Slowly. Steadily. Toward you. Voices rise, not loud, not jubilant, just louder than before. People pointing, some begin to cry. Others simply sit straighter. The light grows brighter. You see its shape now. A funnel. A deck. The outline of a ship. The Carpathia. It arrives not with horns and celebration, but with grim resolve. You watch it creep toward the first cluster of lifeboats, A crew of shadows moving quickly along its rails. Ropes are tossed, ladders lowered. You hear someone shout, "One at a time, women first." You sit very still. You can't cry. Not yet. You can't feel your hands anymore. Your lips crack when you try to speak. You just watch the miracle float toward you, smaller than you imagined, but glowing like a lighthouse in a sea of grief. When it's your boat's turn, the shouts grow clearer. "Hold her steady! Up you go!" One by one, passengers are pulled from the lifeboat and onto the rope ladders. Some can't climb. They're hoisted. One woman faints. Another refuses to let go of the frozen bundle in her arms, even when they try to take it. The sailors relent. She carries it aboard. When it's your turn, you don't speak. You just climb. Every rung burns your hands and your legs feel like they belong to someone else. A sailor grabs your arm near the top, pulls you aboard with a strength that makes you gasp. You collapse onto the deck of the Carpathia, legs refusing to stand, but you're on it. You're on it. They wrap a blanket around your shoulders. A voice asks your name. You answer without hearing yourself speak. You glance back toward the lifeboats, still arriving, still rising out of the sea like weary ghosts. And further out, the horizon, still dark, still cruel. You look up at the sky and the stars are still there, exactly as they were, exactly as they'll always be. The deck of the Carpathia feels impossibly small beneath your feet. Crowded, trembling, alive in a way the Titanic never was. You're not sure if it's actually shaking, or if it's just you. Your knees don't seem to trust the concept of standing anymore. There's a dull ache in your calves, in your back, behind your eyes. You're moving, walking, being herded gently but firmly by stewards and officers into the warmth of the ship, but everything feels like it's happening to someone else. A woman near you is sobbing uncontrollably. Not dramatic, not performative, just a raw animal sound, her face buried in the wool of her coat. A nurse tries to lead her away, but she clings to the rail. You think you recognize her from the first-class lounge. She wore a hat with plumage that nearly took out a floral arrangement during tea. Now her hat is gone. Her hair is matted to her forehead. She looks exactly like everyone else. Inside, they've cleared space. They've made the Carpathia into a lifeboat of its own. Blankets drape over every surface. Pillows stacked in corners. Crates turned into chairs. The heat is shocking after the cold. It stings your skin, makes your cheeks feel like they're peeling. Someone hands you a mug of something warm. You don't know what it is. You drink it anyway. It could be soup, or tea, or just hot water. It burns going down and it's glorious. You're given a place to sit on the floor. Others surround you, huddled together like refugees, like survivors. Because that's what you are now. Not passengers, not aristocrats or debutantes or tycoons or artists. Just survivors. And no one seems entirely comfortable with the title. You look around and recognize faces. Or rather, you recognize the remains of faces. The proud chin of the woman who used to correct the steward's grammar. The smirk of the man who always knew which fork to use without looking. The little girl who ran full speed down the promenade, giggling days ago. Everyone is quieter now, smaller. Even the loud ones don't have much left to say. Across the room, a steward, one of Carpathia's own, is moving down a line of passengers with a clipboard and a thick wool coat hanging from his arm. He asks each person for their name and writes it carefully. You notice he asks everyone twice, even the ones who can barely speak. He wants to get it right. You admire that. When he reaches you, you answer softly. He writes it down, then pauses. "First class?" he asks gently. You nod. "Anyone else in your party?" he adds, eyes kind but detached. Like he's asked this same question 100 times already. Maybe he has. You hesitate, then shake your head. He doesn't press. Just hands you a coat, offers a tight smile and moves on. You pull the coat around you and realize it doesn't matter if it fits. Nothing fits anymore. Not your clothes, not your shoes, not your story. You glance at your hands, still shaking, and finally notice your knuckles are bruised from gripping the lifeboat too tightly. You hadn't even felt it. You sit there for what feels like hours. Someone begins to whisper the details of what they saw. The ship breaking in two, the funnels falling, the people in the water. It spreads like fog across the room, each voice adding new horrors. But no one interrupts, no one cries out. You all just let it settle into your bones like the cold already has. At some point, a clergyman appears. You don't know what denomination. He kneels and offers quiet prayers to no one in particular. A few people bow their heads, others stare into space. One man looks up and says very softly, "Where was God tonight?" The clergyman doesn't answer, he just bows his head again. Later you'll move to another section of the ship, deeper inside, warmer, less crowded. Someone has tried to set up makeshift beds. You sit on a bench and try to rest. Every time you close your eyes, you see the stern of the Titanic lifting into the air. You hear the screams, you hear the band. You open your eyes again. They bring food, bread, tinned meat, tea with too much sugar. You eat without tasting any of it. A child next to you asks where her father is. Her mother says, "We'll see him in New York." The girl believes her, or pretends to. You remember what time it is, not from a clock but from the hush that falls over the room as the steward returns, this time with a list. He begins reading names aloud. Survivors. Not many. Each name is a pin dropped into the water. Sometimes there's a gasp of recognition, a sob, a surge of hope. But more often, silence. Names pass into the air unanswered. They keep going anyway. When your name is called, you raise your hand, that's all. No words, just a small gesture that says I'm here. A man nearby scribbles the confirmation into a ledger. Your name now officially belongs to the living. It's early morning when the ship finally starts to move again. You don't feel it at first. But then someone mutters, "We're turning back." And you do feel it. The subtle shift. The engine hum. The forward lurch toward something other than death. Toward New York. The survivors whisper different things now. About dockings, about press, about whether to send telegrams. Some are still frozen. Others have begun to pace. You hear the phrase, "White Star Line," a lot. And lawsuit. And scandal. But for most it's just names. Names of those missing. Names of those who stayed behind. You catch fragments. He went back for his valet, or she wouldn't leave her husband, or they gave up their seats for strangers. You remember the orchestra, and for the first time you say something. "Do we know if the band survived?" It comes out hoarse, broken, like your voice doesn't quite belong to you. A woman across the aisle hears you. She shakes her head. "None of them," she says quietly. "They played until the end." You nod. "Of course they did." You wrap the coat tighter and lean back against the wall. You survived the greatest shipwreck in history. You've lost things you'll never get back. People, illusions, certainty. But you're here. You look down at your lap, at your shaking hands. And finally you let yourself cry. Not because you're afraid, but because you aren't anymore. By the time daylight fully floods the interior of the Carpathia, there's a different kind of quiet. Not the stunned, frozen silence from hours ago, but a slow, heavy hush that settles in the corners like fog that's chosen not to lift. People speak now, but carefully, not with volume or certainty. Every sentence has the weight of something unfinished, something waiting to be corrected. You keep expecting someone to say it was all a mistake, that the Titanic is still afloat behind you, trailing in your wake like a sulking younger sibling. But you know better. Morning brings new questions, real ones, practical ones. There are stewards walking around with clipboards and pencils worn down to stubs asking, "Your name again?" and "What was your stateroom number?" and "Do you know where your luggage might be located?" As if luggage matters, as if there's anything left to retrieve. You answer anyway because that's what people do when they don't know what else to do. They give information. They follow procedure. It makes the chaos feel smaller. Someone brings you coffee. Real coffee. Bitter, dark, alive in your mouth. You hold the cup like it's sacred. The porcelain is cracked. You don't care. The warmth against your palms feels like a kind of forgiveness. In the dining room, they've cleared out tables to make room for blankets and survivors. You're allowed to sit at one of the remaining spots. The tablecloth is linen, the cutlery mismatched. You spread butter on toast with a knife that's probably meant for fish. No one corrects you. No one corrects anyone anymore. And that's the strangest part. First class, second class, steerage. It's all bled together now. There are no labels anymore. No seating arrangements. No promenades divided by brass gates. No lectures on which fork to use. You find yourself seated beside a young Irish woman who barely speaks English and smells of sea salt and smoke. She offers you half of her bread without hesitation. You take it without thinking. One of the surviving crew members shuffles past, face drawn and lips tight, carrying a folded stack of towels. He's wearing someone else's jacket. It doesn't fit. You watch him disappear into a corridor and wonder how many orders he gave the night before that no one heard. Later, you're moved again. Carpathia's crew is still finding rooms, making lists, trying to match survivors with any comforts they can salvage. You end up in a shared cabin, 4 bunks, 2 women already there, both asleep. One still wearing a lifebelt like a second skin. She hasn't taken it off. You lower yourself onto the 3rd bunk and sit there, hands resting on your knees. You don't unpack. You have nothing to unpack, not anymore. A stewardess knocks on the open door frame and gently informs you there's a bulletin posted in the main saloon. You rise slowly. Your legs ache, joints stiff like you've aged 20 years overnight. The saloon is crowded, survivors in blankets and borrowed coats, eyes squinting at the paper tacked to the wall. You join the mass, lean in, and read the handwritten list. Names, hundreds of them. Survivors confirmed aboard Carpathia. They're listed alphabetically, first and last name, and beside them, brief notes. Infirmary. Cabin 27. Wife aboard. Unaccompanied. You scan the list, first for yourself, just to be sure, and then for others. Names you remember from dinners and promenades. The woman who wore the necklace made of sapphires. The gentleman who always smoked a pipe carved like a lion. You find a few, most you don't. You step back and make room for others. Someone behind you is crying softly. Someone else is reading aloud for a friend who can't see well enough to find their own name. The room smells of sweat and seawater and boiled coffee. It smells like grief that's had just enough time to settle. You leave the saloon and walk toward the bow. You don't know why. Maybe you just need to see open water again without expecting a ghost ship to rise from it. You step out onto the deck, wrapping your arms tightly around yourself. The wind is sharp but not cruel, it's just wind. It doesn't mean anything now. A young steward stands near the railing, hands clasped behind his back, eyes fixed on the horizon. He looks like he hasn't slept. You pause beside him, not speaking at first, just watching the sea with him. After a while he says, "I was supposed to be on her, the Titanic." You glance at him. "What happened?" He shrugs. "Caught influenza the week before. Couldn't get out of bed. I cursed it for days." You don't say anything. There's nothing to say. After a long pause, he adds, "Everyone talks about the band." You nod. "They kept playing," he says, voice thin, "even after the deck tilted, even after people were screaming. Like they knew it wouldn't save them, but it might save someone." You picture them again. The violinist, the cellist, the final note. "What did they play?" you ask. "No one agrees," he says. "Some say it was autumn. Others say nearer, my God, to thee." But maybe they were just playing what people needed to hear. You nod again. The wind shifts slightly, and the ocean stretches out in endless silver-grey folds. Back inside, you find a letter waiting for you. Not from anyone, just a form. A steward says they're collecting details to wire ahead to New York, to relatives, press, the White Star Line. You're to provide a short statement. Your name, class, experience. You stare at the blank paper for a long time, and then, in the smallest handwriting you've ever used, you write, "First class. Survived a night on lifeboat. Saw shipbreak. Left many behind. Band played to the end. I don't feel like I survived." You fold the paper, hand it back. No one questions it. That night there are no fancy dinners, no menus. You sit on the floor beside a porthole, a borrowed blanket over your legs, a cup of broth in your hands. It's warm. That's enough. A girl nearby sings softly in another language. It doesn't matter what it means. The melody is what matters. The presence of sound, the act of doing something. You lie down eventually, not in a bed but on a bench, your coat for a pillow. You watch the ceiling and try not to picture the stars over the Titanic. You try not to hear the silence. You try not to count who didn't make it. The Carpathia sails on, and you begin to understand that surviving isn't a moment. It's something you'll have to do again tomorrow. You wake to movement, not violent, not jarring. Just that soft, persistent roll of a ship pressing forward against the waves. A reminder that you're still between two worlds. You're wrapped in a blanket that doesn't belong to you, on a bench that wasn't made for sleeping, in a borrowed life. The Carpathia continues her journey toward New York, and with each nautical mile, you feel the weight of what was left behind pulling further and further out of reach. The more distance you gain from the sinking, the less you understand it. The other survivors stir around you, blinking into the unfamiliar daylight like animals emerging from caves. You see the same faces from yesterday, changed, hollowed, but still here. Someone hands out breakfast, dry bread, a slice of ham. Tea so weak it looks embarrassed to call itself tea. Still, you eat every bite. There's no such thing as indulgence anymore. Every gesture now feels like an act of survival. You find yourself nodding politely to people you wouldn't have acknowledged on the Titanic. You say thank you for food you wouldn't have accepted just a few nights ago. The walls are gone. So are the illusions. Mid-morning, a crewman gathers the first-class survivors. Not for a formal meeting, but an update, he says. You all assemble in one of the smaller lounges, the kind that once hosted card games and gossip, now eerily subdued. You take a seat near a familiar face, a gentleman who used to promenade with military precision and a monocle that never slipped. It's gone now, the monocle. So is the posture. He looks older, slumped, like someone carved a few years into his spine overnight. A White Star Line representative, well-dressed, uncomfortable, stands before the group and clears his throat. He thanks everyone for their courage, their composure in trying circumstances, and their commitment to the legacy of the Titanic. The words are elegant, memorized, useless. Then he tells you the latest. Press has already swarmed the dock in New York. Hundreds of journalists, some of them hiring tugboats to meet the Carpathia at sea. He warns you, they'll want stories. Names, pictures, details, no one speaks. They will pay handsomely, he adds more quietly, for the exclusive ones. Now there's movement, glances exchanged, a murmur, some nod, others frown. The man with the monocle chuckles once dryly and says, "How vulgar." Then he says nothing else for the rest of the meeting. When it ends, you don't return to your shared cabin. You go to the deck instead, bundled against the wind. The cold has lost its bite. No longer the death-rattle chill of that April night, but a brisk Atlantic breeze that almost feels honest. You stand by the rail, watching waves peel back like velvet ribbons, and you realise you have no idea what you'll say when you reach land, or who you'll say it to. You haven't yet written to your family, or your friends. You've scribbled nothing for the press. You haven't even told your own story out loud, not to the other survivors, not even to yourself. It lives in your body now, in the way your shoulders curve inward, in the way you flinch at sudden noises, in the way you avoid mirrors. Later in the early afternoon, a steward announces a memorial service will be held at sunset. For all classes, he says, all denominations. That last part feels like a formality, but it carries weight. You nod. Everyone nods. Some people cry. Most just go quiet. You spend the afternoon doing what has become your new normal, sitting still, saying little, drifting between the noise and the quiet. In one hallway, you hear someone arguing about a lost necklace. In another, someone gently washing their child's hair with a cloth and a tin basin. The smallest rituals now feel enormous. They carry weight, proof of life, proof that tomorrow still exists. You pass a woman sitting alone with a blank sheet of telegram paper in front of her. Her hand hovers over it, unmoving. You know that feeling, the paralysis of telling people you've lived. When the sun begins to lower, they gather everyone on the outer deck, survivors from every class, every corner of the ship. The first-class passengers stand beside those from second and steerage. There are no more barriers, no more labels, just humans, survivors, witnesses. You take your place among them, shoulder to shoulder, the wind tugging softly at coats and scarves, the orange-pink light of the setting sun casting everything in a glow too beautiful for what's about to happen. A minister steps forward. You never see who he is. You just hear his voice. He recites from scripture. He speaks of the sea giving up its dead, of courage, of peace, of rest. He reads out the number, 1,500 and something. There's debate already about the exact figure. You hear people whispering. Some think it's more, some less. It doesn't matter. You could multiply it by 10, and it would still be impossible to comprehend. Then he reads names. Not all, just a few. The ones confirmed lost. The ones people recognised. The ones who were loved enough to be remembered already. As he speaks, a sailor walks the line of survivors with a box of flowers. Carnations, mostly. You take one. Everyone does. When the reading ends, he nods. You step forward to the rail, together, and let them go. One by one, the flowers drop into the sea, floating like tiny lifeboats of colour on the endless grey. You don't cry, not here, not while everyone's watching. You don't speak. You just stand there, hand on the cold railing, listening to the waves slap softly against the side of the ship. Someone starts singing, unplanned, unaccompanied. Nearer, my God, to thee. A voice that cracks on every note. Another joins, then another. Soon, the whole deck is humming, singing, whispering the words. Some don't know the lyrics, they hum anyway. You look around at the faces, sunburned, pale, stunned, gaunt. Some still wearing life belts, others in borrowed clothing, boots too big, coats too small. You wonder who they were before, who you were, if any of it will matter now. The sun sinks lower, dipping behind a cloud that glows like fire from within, and in that moment, with the song hanging in the air, with salt on your lips and wind in your hair, you realise the last thing the Titanic took from you was certainty. Not safety, not class, not even innocence. Certainty. And that is something you will never get back. Night has fallen again, and this time it's not terrifying. Just long, just quiet. The Carpathia sails onward through the dark like a worn-out candle, her decks glowing faintly beneath the moonlight. No one is sleeping much anymore. Not really. People drift in and out of shallow dreams, the kind that wake you more exhausted than you began. You hear murmurs from behind half-closed cabin doors as you walk the corridor. Someone muttering names, someone crying softly into a pillow, someone whispering prayers in a language you don't know. The ship feels full of ghosts, and not all of them are dead. You've taken to pacing, not in any purposeful way, just walking. A slow loop of forward motion to convince your body you're still here. The rhythm of your footsteps becomes its own kind of comfort. Left, right, and your fingers brush the walls like you're making sure they won't disappear. Eventually you end up in one of the smaller lounges where someone's left the lights on low. It's empty except for a single older man at a table with a half-empty teacup and a folded newspaper, his eyes fixed somewhere far beyond the walls. You nod to him. He doesn't return it, but you sit anyway, a few chairs away. The silence between you is companionable. On the table in front of you is a deck of cards, left there by someone, probably a survivor who decided halfway through a game that there's nothing amusing about playing bridge anymore. You pick them up, shuffle, deal them into meaningless piles just to move your hands. I saw her go down, the man says suddenly. You look up. The Titanic, he continues, voice low. From my boat. She split right in front of us. Looked like she was trying to hold herself together, but just couldn't. He doesn't blink. Doesn't even really look at you. You nod. You've heard a dozen versions of that same sentence now. Everyone who saw it tries to explain it like it might make it easier to carry. It doesn't. He continues. My wife was in the other boat. I put her in. Told her I'd see her at breakfast. I was holding her gloves when the deck tilted. You look at his hands. No gloves now. Just raw, red fingers curled loosely on the table. I found a piece of wood, he adds. Hung on to it till the Carpathia came. Thought it would be romantic. Heroic. He smiles without joy. It wasn't. You don't respond. You just sit with him in the quiet because silence is the only language you both understand now. When you finally leave the lounge, it's late. The corridors are mostly empty, save for the occasional crew member or someone wandering like you, eyes unfocused. You return to your bunk, but you don't lie down. You sit by the porthole instead, staring out at the dark, trying to picture what the New York skyline will look like when it finally rises out of the sea. There are rumours, of course, that people are already lining the docks, that newsboys are selling special editions before the ship even arrives, that journalists are paying survivors for statements like, it's a betting pool. One woman claimed she was offered $100 just to hand over the hat she was wearing when she got off the lifeboat. She laughed when she said it. Then she started crying. Some people are preparing statements. You saw a young woman earlier writing in a notebook, crossing out whole pages, rewriting lines, rehearsing them under her breath like a monologue. Others are talking to each other, forming unofficial alliances. Who will say what, how they'll word it, whether to speak at all. You're not sure where you stand. What could you possibly say? That dinner was exceptional. That your suite had ivory doorknobs and electric lighting, and a tub that filled faster than any tub on land. That you floated in a lifeboat as people screamed your name, and you stayed quiet, stayed still because someone said the boat might tip. You have nothing to say that doesn't taste like guilt. The next morning they serve real breakfast. Or try to. Fried eggs, toast, sausages, jam in little tins. It feels strange to sit at a table again. Plates clink, tea is poured. The survivors eat slowly, like they're still learning how. You catch yourself using the wrong fork and laugh. The woman next to you looks over, confused. You tell her what happened. She doesn't laugh, just nods and goes back to cutting her egg into tiny trembling pieces. A steward enters with a bulletin. It's posted near the entrance. Another list of names. You don't need to read it. You know who's not on it. You've memorized the absences, but still you look. Your eyes scan down instinctively. And then, there it is. One name, not one you knew well. Just a name from a dinner card. Someone you danced with once, someone who complimented your gloves. Just a name. And yet, it punches the air out of your lungs like a fist to the ribs. You sit back down. Someone touches your shoulder gently. Doesn't ask, doesn't say anything. Just a hand. That's enough. By noon, someone brings a camera on deck. A photographer. Not from the Carpathia. Someone from one of the tugboats that met the ship earlier. He's asking permission now. Some say yes, most don't. But he snaps photos anyway. Faces wrapped in shawls, eyes hollow, feet tucked under borrowed blankets. You manage to turn just before he catches you. Later, you hear someone talking to the captain, asking why the Californian didn't come, asking why the iceberg warnings weren't taken seriously, asking how this could have happened. The captain says nothing. Someone mutters, "I'd rather drown than be interviewed." You almost agree. That evening someone organises a second memorial. Smaller, less official. You attend, not out of obligation, just because it feels wrong not to. A woman sings a lullaby, one that was playing on a gramophone days ago, back when the world still made sense. Someone places a lantern on the water and watches it drift until it becomes a star. The group disperses quietly. You stay behind. You stare into the Atlantic, which looks exactly the same. You whisper a name. It doesn't echo. It just vanishes, like everything else. The sea turns from slate to steel as dawn creeps up again, this time accompanied by a low, whispering fog. It hangs over the water like a veil, and for a moment you imagine the Titanic could still be out there, obscured just beyond the mist, that if you squinted hard enough, you might see her silhouette. 4 grand funnels, glass domes, the steady thrum of impossible confidence. But the fog is empty, and the only sound is the slow churn of the Carpathia's engines. You're standing near the rail again, arms folded tight across your chest, eyes scanning that empty space ahead. Behind you, on deck, survivors stretch out stiff limbs, some walking in slow loops like inmates allowed their hour in the yard. There's a rhythm to it now, meals, pacing, the occasional cry in the night. Someone coughs. Someone else whispers a name and is met with silence. The routines of grief are starting to settle in like frostbite. First numbness, then pain, then nothing at all. You turn and head inside when the wind picks up. A steward nods to you as you pass. You've started recognizing faces, though you never knew their names before. Now you know them by their grief. There's the woman who won't let go of her baby's blanket, even though she left the child behind in the water. The man who mutters the same 4 lines of a poem to himself, over and over, like it's the only thing anchoring him to the deck. You catch yourself wondering how people will carry this once the ship docks, who will fall apart publicly, who will pretend it never happened. Inside, the saloon is quieter than usual. No one talks much now. A few survivors sit near the stove, passing around a letter someone wrote but can't bring themselves to mail. Others just stare. You join them. You sit and try not to imagine what comes next. And then, the tilt. It's slight, barely noticeable. A strange lurch that only someone who's been through that would notice. Your back straightens. You glance toward the portholes. Water stays level. Nothing is wrong. It was probably just a current. Or your nerves. You tell yourself that even though your heart has kicked into gear like someone lit a match in your chest. Then the crew moves a little faster. One of them hurries down the hall carrying a basket of life jackets. Just a precaution. You know that phrase now. You hate it. You rise from your seat. You're not panicking, but your body moves before your brain can argue. Outside on the deck, others are noticing it too. Those subtle tells. The sudden shift in tone. The way the officers stop smiling when they think no one is looking. It's not an iceberg this time, but it is something. A steward confirms it after being pressed. They've spotted growlers, small floating hunks of ice ahead. They're navigating through a debris field. Just another reminder, as if you needed one, that the sea doesn't forgive. You grip the railing and stare at the horizon again. You half expect to see another mountain of ice leering out of the mist, but there's nothing, only the broken sea. Eventually the tension passes. The ship moves on, the officers stop pacing. A few of the more confident survivors even chuckle in relief. One of them lights a cigarette and says, "They won't let two ships sink in the same week. Bad for headlines." You don't laugh. Later someone brings up a name again, Californian. You've heard the mutters for days now. How close it was. How its crew saw flares. How they didn't respond. How they could have been there in time, if only. You don't know if it's true. But the fury in the voices of those telling the story is very, very real. One man tells you the Californian's wireless operator had gone to bed. They had no idea, he says, voice shaking. Not until it was far too late. He grips the table like he wants to throw it. They saw the lights. They saw us. But maybe they didn't. The ocean plays tricks at night. Just ask anyone who spent hours in a lifeboat looking over their shoulder, waiting for the ship to reappear. Maybe the Californian really didn't know. Or maybe it did, and chose sleep over salvation. No one will ever agree. The only thing people do agree on is the flare debate. Some claim the rockets sent up from the Titanic were white, distress signals. Others swear they were red, celebration signals used to mark a party or arrival. A wealthy man from Texas says he saw red with his own eyes. "Looked like a carnival," he mutters. "They probably thought we were dancing." A woman nearby speaks for the first time in hours. "We were." And that silences everyone, because yes, there was dancing. There were musicians playing in the lounge. There were couples swirling beneath chandeliers while the hull carved its fatal path through ice. You retreat back to your cabin and stare at the ceiling. You wonder how much of the story will ever be known. How much will be twisted. How much will be lost. You already see it happening in fragments, facts breaking off like chunks of iceberg, drifting off in different directions. You close your eyes and try to remember what the last night really felt like. You think about the final dinner, the way the cutlery gleamed, the way the duck was served with orange sauce, the way you laughed at a joke you didn't even hear, because that's what you were supposed to do. You think about how the world ended without warning. The lights didn't flicker, the music didn't stop, it just tilted and changed everything. The Carpathia continues forward, inching toward New York, and with every hour the wreck fades further into memory, but not into history. Not yet. It's still too raw, too real. The press has already written its story, but you know the truth is still scattered across the bottom of the Atlantic, clinging to luggage, to letters, to jewellery that will never be claimed. You stare at the wall and wonder what part of you didn't survive. Not your body, that's here, but something. You don't know what it is yet, only that it slipped beneath the water and didn't come back up. The morning you first glimpse New York, it doesn't look like a city. It looks like a mirage. The skyline is distant and smeared with fog, a jagged line of shadows pressed flat against a pale grey sky. At first it's hard to believe it's real. You stare at it from the Carpathia's deck, unsure if it's your eyes playing a trick again, the way they did in the lifeboat when you kept thinking you saw the Titanic's lights coming back. But no, it's there, growing slowly larger, the dull outline of the Woolworth building, the spiderwebs of docks stretching into the harbour, 1,000 buildings pushing up against each other like strangers waiting to tell you what you should feel. There's no cheering, no applause, just a hush, as if everyone aboard the Carpathia has silently agreed that nothing they've been through deserves a soundtrack. A few people murmur, "We're here," but they don't say it with joy. They say it like it's a diagnosis. You remain near the rail, watching the city approach at the same slow crawl that death did. The sea between you and land is thick with small boats now, tugboats, ferries, and launches teeming with photographers, journalists, curious spectators leaning dangerously over the rails just to get a glimpse of your floating tragedy. One boat passes close. A man on board shouts up to the Carpathia, "Can you describe the sinking?" Someone next to you mutters, "Only if you describe drowning." The man keeps shouting anyway. Another one flashes his camera over and over, the bulb popping like lightning, until someone near the stern throws a coat over the rail to block the view. People are pressing against the deck now, survivors and crew alike, some craning for their first look at land, others just trying to find fresh air away from the stench of boiled linen and overused grief. You can tell who's preparing for the arrival and who isn't. Some survivors have wiped their faces clean, tucked in borrowed shirts, straightened collars that don't fit. Others still wear life belts out of reflex or stare with swollen eyes as if the sea might suddenly come back for them. You're somewhere in between. You haven't changed clothes. You have none to change into. You didn't comb your hair. It feels unimportant. You lean forward slightly against the rail and try to remember what the skyline looked like the last time you saw it. Before the voyage, before the grandeur, before the sound of rivets screaming underwater. You realise you can't. The past is warped. There's only before the sinking and after. As the Carpathia enters the harbour proper, you feel it. A tremor of something close to panic ripple through the crowd. Not fear of another iceberg or malfunction. No, this is something else. The fear of being seen. The fear of stepping into a world that expects you to explain what happened and smile through it. A man in front of you turns around suddenly and says, "What should we say?" No one answers him. There is no good answer. Dock workers are visible now, lining the piers in rows, staring up at you like spectators at a play. Some hold signs with names, others hold notebooks. Cameras click and flash like a hailstorm, catching every possible face, every possible tear. You think about ducking behind a crate. You don't. You stand there, still, letting them look, even though you know they don't really see you. Then, a hush falls. Ahead, on the dock, the crowd parts slightly, and for the first time you see the waiting families. Mothers, wives, husbands, children. Some dressed for a celebration, some in their night clothes, some with eyes so wide they look like they've been awake for days. One woman clutches a telegram in both hands, pressing it to her chest like it might break if she lets go. Another man holds a hat crushed in his grip, as if he's forgotten what hands are supposed to do. As the ship is moored, ropes thrown and tightened, the crowd erupts, not into applause but into motion. People shouting names, people sobbing, people craning their necks trying to count who's coming off and who isn't. They've set up a system. Survivors are led off in groups, names called alphabetically. You wait. Not because you want to, just because you have no choice. The gangway is narrow, and the world on the other side of it feels like a test you never studied for. When your name is called, your feet don't move at first. The steward says it again, gently this time, and you nod. You descend the gangway slowly, one hand gripping the railing like it's the only stable thing in your life. The harbour air smells like coal, salt, and something faintly sweet. Pastries from a nearby cart. It's overwhelming. Reporters surround the base of the ramp, shouting questions. Were you awake when the ship hit? Did you see anyone refuse to leave? Is it true the band played until the end? You push past them, you don't speak, you keep walking. Then, a voice from your right. Are you alone? That stops you. You turn. A young reporter, barely more than a boy, stands with a pencil hovering over his notebook. He looks unsure. Kind, almost. His voice drops lower. Did you lose someone? You nod once. Just once. It's all you can do. He lowers his notebook. I'm sorry, he says. You keep walking. The Red Cross has set up tables along the dock. Tea, soup, blankets, notes for relatives. A man hands you a paper and asks you to write the name of someone to contact. You stare at the blank space, then write your own. You don't know why. You walk past a group of children holding up signs, welcome survivors, though none of them seem to understand what the word survivor means. One girl looks disappointed that you're not smiling. You make it to the far end of the dock where a group of carriages and automobiles waits, along with an ambulance or two. Some people are crying, some are shouting, others reunite without a word, just holding each other, wordless and shaking. No one is waiting for you. You sit on a bench, and you breathe. It takes longer than you expect, because the air on land doesn't taste the same anymore, and the ground doesn't feel like home, not yet. The bench is cold beneath you, even with the spring sun warming the dock. It cuts through your coat like a second chill, one that reminds you land isn't always safe either. People pass in waves, survivors being swept away by family, by handlers from the White Star Line, by reporters and photographers and charity workers. Some leave quickly, pulled into waiting carriages and whisked off like returning soldiers. Others linger like you, stunned into stillness, unsure where to go next now that everything has changed and nothing feels earned. You sit with your hands clasped tightly in your lap, fingers interlaced like they're holding each other hostage. For a moment you watch a young woman across the way, wrapped in an oversized shawl, hair still tangled from salt spray. She's speaking with a priest who has one hand gently on her arm, nodding slowly while she tells him something between a whisper and a sob. You can't hear the words, but you recognise the posture. The shape of grief is becoming familiar. Around the edges of the dock, more photographers hover like gulls. They snap shots of the most visibly broken. The Red Cross volunteers try to block their view with blankets and umbrellas, but it's no use. You see one man try to interview a woman whose hands won't stop shaking. She just keeps saying, "He said we had time," over and over, until someone pulls her gently away. Eventually, a uniformed clerk from the White Star Line approaches you. He's young, polished, too crisp for this moment. His shoes are clean. He doesn't look like he's spoken to a single person from a lifeboat. He holds a clipboard like a shield and says your name. You nod. "We have temporary lodging available for unaccompanied passengers," he tells you, not unkindly. "Just until more permanent arrangements can be made." You almost laugh. Permanent is a word that doesn't mean anything to you anymore. Still, you follow him. He leads you toward a line of waiting carriages marked with placards for first-class survivors. A ridiculous label now, as if the sea asked for your ticket before swallowing you. You're placed in a carriage with two others, a woman in her 50s with perfect posture and dead eyes, and a young man who keeps looking down at his scuffed shoes like they're the only familiar thing left in his world. No one speaks as the carriage pulls away from the docks and starts its slow journey into the city. New York moves on around you. The streets are full of carts, children playing, men shouting about fish prices. A normal Thursday morning, alive and bustling and utterly indifferent to the fact that the world just ended at sea. You look out the window at a woman holding a baguette and laughing with her friend and wonder what she would have done in a lifeboat. Would she have rowed? Would she have frozen? You stop watching. The carriage drops you off at a small hotel, one of the nicer ones, tucked between brick buildings and trimmed with ivy. A clerk at the front desk barely looks up as your group enters. He just waves a hand toward a woman in a navy blue suit who's already moving toward you. She introduces herself as someone from the White Star Line, offers you a tired smile and says, "We've prepared rooms for you. Please take whatever time you need. Food is available downstairs." The young man next to you asks if there's a bath. She nods. He says nothing else. Your room is quiet, clean, too clean. A simple bed, neatly made. A washstand with porcelain basin. A robe folded at the foot of the mattress. You stand in the centre of the room and don't move for 10 minutes. You could sleep, you could eat, you could undress, but instead you just exist. Stuck in a moment where your body has arrived, but your mind is still out there somewhere, lost in the black Atlantic. Eventually you wash your face in cold water and descend to the dining room. It's not grand, just functional. White tablecloths, gentle clinking of spoons and cups. Survivors fill the room, each at their own table. Some read the paper, others sit without food. A few have visitors. You order tea and a slice of toast, though you don't finish either. Swallowing feels like too much effort. Then the newspapers arrive. A boy enters the room carrying a bundle under his arm and lays them out at a side table. You watch as they're picked up one by one. Headlines scream across the page. Titanic tragedy, over 1,500 dead. Ship of dreams becomes nightmare. Millionaires, musicians, mothers lost at sea. You don't want to look. You look anyway. There's a photo of the ship taken before departure. You stare at it. So pristine, so proud. The captions tell the usual story. Largest ship in the world, unsinkable, luxury beyond compare. You trace your finger over the image, trying to match the windows to your old cabin. The grand staircase dome glints in the sunlight like a lie caught on camera. Another paper shows photos of survivors. Not many, just a handful, mostly those who'd already spoken to the press. One woman gives a confident quote. It was simply a matter of maintaining dignity. You want to laugh, but it catches in your throat. Dignity. In a lifeboat, surrounded by screams. You turn the page. There's a full list of names. Those confirmed dead, those missing, those saved. You scan for familiar ones. You find several. One makes your breath stop for a moment. Not someone you knew well, just someone you saw once at dinner. The waiter dropped a fork and she laughed like it was the greatest scandal of the century. You fold the paper and push it aside. By evening you're given access to a telegraph form. You sit in the hotel lounge with it in your lap, staring at the blank lines for a full hour before writing anything. Finally you scrawl out a short message. Alive. Landed safely. We'll explain more later. It feels insulting, diminished, like saying, "The sky was a little cloudy today after living through a hurricane, but it's all you can manage." You hand it off to the front desk and return to your room. That night you try to sleep. You lie in the bed and stare at the ceiling. The pillow smells faintly of starch and lavender. You wonder what the sea smells like at the bottom, where your stateroom now sits, silent and collapsed. At some point you dream. You're back on the promenade, the stars are still above you, the deck is still steady, but you know what's coming. And when you turn to run, your feet won't move. Then the band starts to play, and you wake up cold, even under the covers. Morning seeps in through the curtains like it's not sure it's welcome. You lie there for a while in the hotel bed, blinking up at the ceiling, trying to remind yourself that you are safe, that the walls will not collapse, that the floor will not tip, that the noise outside is a delivery wagon and not the groan of steel surrendering to the sea. But your body doesn't quite believe you. It's still waiting for the jolt, still listening for screams beneath the silence. When you finally get up, it's because you can't stand being still anymore. The air in the room feels stale, like you've trapped something in it. Fear, maybe, or whatever ghost version of yourself keeps dragging behind you like a wet coat. You splash water on your face. It feels foreign. Cold, yes, but not cold the way the ocean was. That kind of cold gets into your bones and writes its name there. You go down to the dining room. The same handful of survivors are scattered across the tables, all of you pretending to eat meals that just remind you of who's not here to eat them. The coffee tastes burnt today. The jam too sweet. Someone near the window starts talking about insurance settlements. Another asks if they can still retrieve trunks from the sea. As if anything made of wood or silk could survive what the steel could not. You push your plate away and leave early. Outside, New York is impatient. You thought there might be a pause, a moment of reverence, a breath held for the ones who didn't make it. But the city has already resumed its usual chaos. Horns, horses, steam from sewer grates and children dodging in and out of shop doors. There's no mourning here, not really, just headlines and the desire to move on. You blend into the crowd easily. No one recognizes you. You're just another person with tired eyes and the wrong shoes. You walk without direction, letting the streets choose for you. It feels strange to be on solid ground, surrounded by buildings that don't sway. But it also feels fake, like someone painted this whole city on a stage backdrop and might peel it away at any second. Every step you take feels borrowed. Eventually you end up in front of the White Star Line's New York office. You didn't mean to come here. You didn't even know it was this close. But there it is, standing proud and polished, the company's name carved into the stone like nothing happened. There's a small crowd gathered outside, survivors, reporters, families. You recognize a few of the faces. One woman who screamed your name when the lifeboat dropped, another who clutched your hand so hard it left a bruise. She's smoking now, her fingers still trembling. You nod. She nods back. That's enough. Inside the building it's chaos. Men in vests barking orders, stacks of forms, piles of lost luggage reports. You're handed another paper to fill out, another account to give. You do it mechanically now. Your name, your class, who you boarded with, where you ended up. You don't bother asking if they believe you. You barely believe yourself. Someone in the corner is shouting. They knew the ice was there. They got the warnings. A man in uniform tries to calm him down, but the shouting grows. They said it was unsinkable, he yells. They said we were safe. The others look away. You keep your eyes on him, not out of curiosity, out of recognition. You leave the office before they ask you to make a formal statement. There's no statement that would make this easier. Only stories, and you're not ready to give yours away. Back on the street you pass a newsboy holding up the latest edition. He calls out, "Tales of heroism." Lady gives up lifeboat seat. You glance down at the front page. There's a sketch. Your name beneath it. You didn't give an interview. It doesn't matter. You're part of the story now, whether you like it or not. You keep walking. Later, back at the hotel, a letter waits for you. It's from someone in England. A distant cousin or a friend of the family, you think. You tear it open with numb fingers. The words are the same as the others you've received since disembarking. Thank God you're alive. We read about it in the papers. You must be so grateful. You fold it neatly and tuck it into the drawer with the others. You aren't sure if grateful is the word. That evening they invite the survivors to a small gathering in the hotel's drawing room. A chance to speak freely, someone says, to reflect. To remember you go because it feels wrong not to. Because part of you wants to hear what others remember. to see if it matches your own patchwork of fear and disbelief. The room is dim, warm, lined with chairs in a circle. About 20 people attend. You sit near the back. At first, no one speaks. Then a woman begins, voice shaking. She talks about her husband, how he helped her into the lifeboat, how he kissed her forehead and said he'd see her in New York, how he wasn't even supposed to be on the ship. Another man describes trying to light a cigarette with shaking hands and how the wind kept blowing the match out. Someone else talks about the silence after the ship went under. It was worse than the screams, he says, because it meant the screaming had stopped. You listen, you nod, but you don't speak. Not yet. When the meeting ends, the group lingers for a moment. Then they drift apart, each person retreating into their own little orbit of memory. You find yourself near a window, looking out over the street, watching as a delivery cart rolls by, and a couple laughs on the corner as if the world isn't darker now. Someone approaches from behind. A woman. You don't know her name, but she introduces herself softly. "I was in boat 5, she says. "I think you were too." You nod. She hesitates, then asks, "Do you ever feel like we weren't supposed to be here?" It's not a question meant for an answer, but you answer anyway. "All the time." She stays beside you for a while, not speaking, just there, and for the first time since the lifeboat you don't feel entirely alone. When she leaves, you return to your room and sit at the small desk near the window. There's paper and a pen waiting for you. You haven't written anything personal since you stepped off the ship, but now you pick up the pen. You start slowly. You don't tell the whole story, but you begin, and for now, that's enough. The days stretch long after that. You don't leave the hotel much. The staff has grown used to you, and you to them. They bring you tea without asking. They nod without words. It's strange how quickly people adapt to trauma, how silence becomes a kind of language, how a shared glance can replace entire conversations. The other survivors still scattered across the building pass you in the hall with that same look. Recognition, restraint, resignation. It says, "We were there, and that's all anyone needs to say now." But outside, the world has already started to move on. The Titanic is front-page news, yes, but the tone is changing. Where there was once reverence, there's now speculation. And then blame. The headlines get sharper. Captain Smith ignored ice warnings. Why were the lifeboats so few? Was the ship ever safe? You scan these papers in the lobby each morning, heart growing colder by the day. No one seems to want the truth. They just want a version that fits their outrage. You stop reading after one story claims a well-known survivor sipped brandy in comfort while steerage passengers drowned. You remember that man. He gave his coat to a crying girl in your lifeboat. But now he's the villain, because the world demands one. You attend a formal inquiry, just once. It's held in a grand building, lined with dark wooden panels and rows of stiff-backed chairs. Survivors speak, crew members, officers, first-class passengers, third-class mothers clutching photographs of missing children. The questions from the panel are brisk, impersonal. What did you see? What did you hear? What did the officers say? You give your account quietly, and they write it down without meeting your eyes. You know it will be filed, sorted, diluted. Afterward, a man in a black coat approaches you on the courthouse steps. "I'm writing a book," he says. "Can I interview you?" You tell him no, not because you don't have a story, but because you don't want it sold. A week later, you return to the docks, not to leave, but to watch. Another ship is departing. Smaller, less grand. You stand by the railings and watch passengers wave their handkerchiefs and tip their hats as the ropes are cast off. There's laughter. The band plays something upbeat, all brass and bounce. For a second, it sounds exactly like the music from the Titanic's last dinner. It hits you like a slap. You take a step back, pressing your hands into your coat pockets, nails digging into your palms to ground yourself. You never hear that song the same way again. Back at the hotel, you receive a letter. This one is different. It's written in a tight, looping hand, and it doesn't begin with, "We're so glad you're alive," or "You must be thankful." It says, "I don't know what to say. I keep trying to write something comforting, but all I think about is how I would feel if it were me, if I had been there, if I had lived instead of someone else. And I suppose that's all I can offer. Not comfort, just understanding, or a wish for it at least. Whatever happened out there, you're still here. You matter, and maybe that's enough for now. You read it 3 times, you don't know who it's from, you keep it anyway. Another day you receive a package, your things, or what's left of them. Somehow, miraculously, your trunk was recovered, one of the few fished from the sea days after the wreck. It smells of brine and rot, but inside some of your clothes remain. A coat, a book, a pair of gloves. The book is warped beyond repair, its pages swollen and unreadable, but you still hold it like a holy relic, because for a moment it smells like the ship, like polished wood and lavender soap and time that has already drowned. You write a letter that evening, a real one, not to family, to someone who didn't make it. You don't name them, you just write, "You were kind, you were clever, you made jokes I didn't always get, but I laughed anyway. I remember the way you looked at the stars like they were showing you something, and I hope wherever you are the sky's clear. I'm sorry I lived, but I will try to deserve it." You don't send it. You fold it and place it inside the warped book, tucked between 2 unreadable pages. Weeks pass, then comes the ceremony. A public memorial in Central Park, dozens of chairs, wreaths of lilies and white roses, clergy and choir boys in stiff collars. You attend, unsure whether it's for the lost or for the people left behind. The speeches are solemn, heavy with grand language, heroism, tragedy, resilience. You listen politely, but what you remember most is the silence that follows, the part where no one speaks, where the air hangs still and people stare at their shoes, their hands, the sky. You sit beside another survivor. Neither of you speaks, but as the choir sings a hymn, one you recognize from the lifeboat, you find your hand brushing theirs, and they don't pull away. Later, when the crowd begins to disperse, you stand. You look out across the park where children now chase pigeons and the sun glints off a vendor's cart. Life has insisted on continuing, and you realize something. You're not healed, not even close. But the ache is no longer a hole. It's a scar. You survived. You're surviving. And that isn't nothing. You take one last look at the crowd, at the flowers, the photos, the floating words etched into marble. You walk away slowly, your shoes crunching over gravel, the sounds of the city rising up around you again like waves. But this time you don't flinch, you just keep walking. And now here you are, months later, lying in a bed that doesn't rock, beneath a ceiling that doesn't creak or threaten to split open. The city outside your window breathes with streetcars, footsteps, dogs barking 3 blocks away. The sounds of life, so steady, so mindless in their rhythm, have returned. And you've returned too, though not entirely. Some part of you is still afloat in the North Atlantic, somewhere between stars and steel, frozen breath and music. You get up earlier these days. You drink your tea a little slower. You carry silence with you, not because you're afraid, but because it feels like respect. A kind of memorial stitched into your posture, into the way you pause before laughing, into the way you reach for door handles and feel phantom metal from the lifeboat beneath your fingers. People ask less now. The headlines have moved on to elections, to scandals, to the next ship promising to be bigger and faster. No one talks about lifeboats over breakfast anymore. The questions have dried up, and honestly, you're grateful. But sometimes, on quiet afternoons, you write it down. Not for the newspapers, not for the books, for yourself, little pieces of it. The lace of the tablecloth on the Titanic's dining room table, the cold porcelain of the sink in your cabin, the sound of laughter on the first evening, carefree and echoing down gold-panelled corridors, the sudden hush when someone mentioned ice for the first time, and how nobody took it seriously. The way the ship tilted, barely at first, then violently, as if even she was ashamed to fall apart. And the band. You still dream about the band. Sometimes when you lie awake you think you can hear them, playing something soft and beautiful, as if to keep the night from noticing it's full of terror. You remember how the notes curled into the cold air, refusing to be silenced. How the musicians kept playing not because it would save anyone, but because someone had to do something. You understand that now. That's why you've begun to live again. You help where you can. You visit others who survived. You send a letter to a woman you never spoke to on the ship, but who sat across from you at dinner every night. You volunteer at the docks, just once a week, helping immigrants off new ships, showing them where to go. Sometimes they ask if the Titanic was real. You smile gently and say, yes, she was very real. There will always be myths now, ghost stories, lovers who died holding hands, millionaires who gave away lifeboat seats, villains made of whispers. You've seen your name in more than one article, misquoted, reimagined. You've been painted as a hero, and sometimes as something else. That used to sting. Now you know better. The truth is simple, you survived. Not because of bravery, not because of privilege, not because of fate, but because the ocean chose not to take you. You don't owe it an explanation. But you owe something to the ones who didn't climb out of that water, so you remember. You tell their names in your head like prayers. And when someone new asks you, years from now, decades from now, what it was like to sail first class on the Titanic, you won't talk about the chandeliers or the wine or the way the linen napkins were folded into little swans. You'll say, it was beautiful, and then it was gone. And they'll ask if you were scared, and you'll say yes, and you'll mean it. Then you'll tuck the memory back into its box, place it gently on the shelf, and keep walking forward into the days you were never supposed to see. Because you're still here, and that matters, even if no one ever understands exactly what it cost you.